Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. A New York judge has decided to postpone his decision on whether President-elect Donald Trump has immunity from prosecution in his criminal hush money trial, even though he has already been convicted. NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports a decision could come next week.
Lawyers for the Manhattan District Attorney over the weekend asked New York Judge Juan Merchan to delay his decision on immunity in order to review how the presidential election would impact Trump's landmark criminal trial. Trump in May was found guilty of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. Emil Bovey, one of Trump's lawyers, agreed with the delay. Bovey said the stay and even a dismissal are necessary to avoid unconstitutional impediments to Trump's ability to govern. The New York judge was expected today to make a decision on whether some evidence brought in during Trump's trial violated the U.S. Supreme Court's recent ruling that presidents cannot be prosecuted for official acts taken in office. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, New York.
Exit polls from last week's election show a variety of reasons why Americans voted the way they did. One major takeaway, higher prices impacted their votes. NPR's Scott Horsley reports when inflation rises, politicians in power often pay for it at the polls.
One of the biggest drivers for voters backing Donald Trump was inflation.
It affects my budget and everyone I know because we're paying more for groceries. It's shocking.
That's Teresa Wolf, who lives in St. Petersburg, Florida. We first spoke a few months ago, and she told me how unhappy she was about the high cost of living. I called her back to hear how she's feeling after the election.
I have to tell you, my first reaction was relief.
Mazyar Manovi, who heads the Eurasia Group, has studied dozens of elections going back decades and found whenever there's a sustained period of high inflation, voters are twice as likely to lose faith in the people running the government. And Vice President Harris was saddled with that incumbent label. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The international airport in Haiti's capital has been temporarily shut down. Gangs opened fire at airplanes landing in Port-au-Prince. Journalist Harold Isaac is in the Haitian capital. He says one plane that was struck was a Spirit Airlines jet.
As the Spirit Airlines, the 951, was attempting to land in Port-au-Prince, it got struck by gunshots and had to abort the landing and reroute to Santiago de los Caballeros in the Dominican Republic. The only injury reported was a flight attendant that got grazed by a bullet.
Meanwhile, officials with JetBlue say one of their planes returning from Haiti landed in New York yesterday. Workers found damage from a bullet on that jet. The violence comes as Haiti's transitional government fired its prime minister and installed a new one. Organized gangs have not stopped terrorizing much of Haiti. On Wall Street, the Dow is down 140 points. This is NPR.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Unions representing striking teachers in Beverly and Gloucester will go before a judge this afternoon for defying a court order to get back to class today. Teachers in Marblehead are also on strike, so thousands of North Shore students don't have class, some for a second day. Gloucester's Mayor Greg Verga says negotiators remain far apart on educator salaries.
We were informed that the Gloucester Teachers Association will not be putting forward a counter wage proposal. Not only is this counterproductive to the negotiation process, but it severely limits our ability to make any form of progress toward finding a solution.
Gloucester teacher Alex Legendre says teachers are well within their rights.
We are asking for basic respect. And yes, fair wages is going to come along with that. School safety is going to come along with that. But the bottom line is just basic respect for the profession.
And teachers plan to rally again in Marblehead this afternoon. A 22-year-old former Massachusetts Air National Guardsman faces sentencing in Boston federal court this afternoon for violating the Espionage Act. Prosecutors are asking the judge to sentence Jack Teixeira to 17 years in prison. The defense is seeking an 11-year sentence, saying Teixeira, quote, regrets his decisions and the harm it caused. He pleaded guilty to posting highly classified material, including documents about Russia's invasion in Ukraine, to the messaging app Discord. In sports, the Bruins skate against the Blues tonight. A red flag warning is posted for the entire state. The risk of brush fires very high. That's until 6 tonight. Sunny, breezy, relatively mild. Highs in the 50s this afternoon. Clear skies tonight, lows to 30. Right now it's 52 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Craft in America, with 2 new episodes on craft and the handmade, science and collectors. Now streaming on the PBS app and craftinamerica.org. Premiering on PBS and YouTube Friday, December 27th.
This is GBH. Thanks for joining us.
Houston Rowdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be back here tomorrow with former Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Judge Justice Margaret Marshall, who gave us the gay rights legislation, who comes from South Africa, and I'm dying to talk to her about the results.
Same-sex marriage she gave us.
Same-sex marriage, what did I say?
Gay rights legislation.
Oh, sorry, that. Same-sex marriage, you're correct. Plus national security expert Juliet Kayyem. Our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970. We were inspired by a book that was finally returned to the Worcester Public Library last week, a mere 51 years after it was first checked out. What is the longest you have procrastinated on a task that would have otherwise taken, I don't know, maybe like 10 minutes? Text us about your ridiculous procrastination stories. We'll read them a little bit before 1 o'clock.
Hey there, Marjorie. So Mayor Wu is in the building. She'll be here in a minute. Before we do, can I just get it out of my system?
Sure.
I'm looking at CNN behind you, and the Judge Merchan, in the case in which Donald Trump was convicted of having committed more than 30 felonies, is now reserving decision on whether to overturn the conviction. And I totally intellectually understand what's going on. Voters said they want him in the White House. I understand that. The notion that these convictions could disappear, the notion that even before he's sworn in, Jack Smith is going to dissolve the prosecutions, both for the documents in Mar-a-Lago and for the insurrection. To me, this is the emotional part, not the intellectual part, is unimaginable. It is just unimaginable. The voters spoke, there's no question about that, and I do agree, probably part of the message was we want him in the Oval Office rather than in a cell. But the notion that he is getting away with these crimes and other potential crimes is just unimaginably horrible.
I know. Makes you feel bad when you get pulled over because you're one day behind on your registration or something like that.
No, but I know you're joking, but think about the message.
No, I'm serious.
The message is that if you are of that stature and can win a huge election, you commit crimes against your country.
Right.
And again, those are only allegations in the indictments in the insurrection case, but also it is possible in a related development, they're talking about maybe on day one, pardoning a lot of the January 6th hostages, as he calls them, as opposed to the insurrectionists. It's just the notion, what this does to the rule of law in this country, to me, is going to be long-lasting and all bad. We're waiting for Mayor Wu. She's in the building. She will be with us momentarily.
Well, I think there's not going to be much rule of law going forward. I mean, I think that's one of the results of this election. You know, the advice and consent of the Senate for the appointments that Donald Trump wants to make, that's going to be out the window too, I think, because he's just going to appoint the people he wants, and you're not going to have those hearings, and you're not going to get great vetting of these people. They're just going to be installed. So I think this is one of the undersides of this election, but apparently it doesn't bother people.
Well, you know, it not only doesn't bother, one of the commentators on CNN yesterday about another issue that is putting me over the edge, it said something like, for those of you who are complaining about this mass deportation plan, which to Trump's credit, he promised it and he is putting the people in place. This guy Homan to his border czar, Homeland Security is Kristi Noem, the dog killer from was it North Dakota or South Dakota? I can never remember.
I think it's
one of the Dakotas.
One of the Dakotas.
She's head of, and Stephen Miller, who is, I would argue, one of the most
South
despicable.
Dakota,
thank you. One of the most despicable human beings and uncaring individuals. The woman said, the commentator yesterday said on CNN, for those who are saying how horrible these mass deportations are, Donald Trump told you the truth, which is true. As a candidate, he said we're going to have mass deportations starting on day one, and he's obviously putting the people in place to do that.
I like the guy who's going to run the EPA, Lee Zeldin, the congressman from New York, who's not really on board with the climate change emergency. As we're talking about having to be prepared for wildfires right here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Do you know what else he did, this Lee Zeldin? Voted not to certify the results of the presidential election, and now he's head of the Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay, Jim, it's not a pretty picture.
No, I mean, people voted, and there was a majority. What is it, 80 million people, give or take a few, voted for Donald Trump. And again, remember that editorial a day or two before the election in the New York Times, which listed a lot of the things he promised he'd do? And the final line in the editorial was, believe him. And apparently, at least on this deportation front and clearly on the climate front, he is honoring his commitments to the American people. And if that's what you're into, so by the way, we're going to start. We usually don't make this decision a day in advance, but I am so bent out of shape about the deportation thing. We're going to start tomorrow's show entertaining your phone calls and thoughts about what is clearly coming as of whatever it is, January 20th, the swearing-in day. The other sort of wonderful thing, wonderful in quotes, is he's being sworn in on Martin Luther King Day.
Right.
And it's... what more can I say? So if you want to start lining up to talk to the mayor, she is, and as a matter of fact, she is walking here as we begin. The number is 877-301-8970. It's now time for November's edition of Ask the Mayor. She's bearing gifts as always with Mayor Michelle Wu. She's here till noon taking our questions and yours. Again, 877-301-8970. And if you're a librarian and would like to speak to the mayor, if you go to Hannah, our colleague who is sitting right there, raise your hand, Hannah, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. You'll probably get to speak to her face to face. Mayor Wu, it's you brought butternut squash with you? Is that what you brought?
I did.
Nice that you did.
And some other things.
Nice to see you.
my
Let's hear it
goodness.
from Mayor Michelle Wu.
Well,
How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm managing after all that's happened in the world, and so I wanted to keep it local. This is a box of goodies from Sikowski Farms in Hadley.
I was kidding.
And it includes some squash. It includes, anyway, I'll back up and say I was out there, a couple-hour drive west, about a month and a half ago, to visit this farm because they are one of the suppliers for our Boston Public Schools lunches.
Great.
We're now sourcing about 15% of our BPS food ingredients from local farms in Massachusetts and New England. Our goal is to more than double that. And it was amazing to see where those squash and broccoli and beans and other vegetables are grown, and to meet the farmers who are putting all of that care into feeding our young people. And we talked about how important it is to support the local economy. So Farmer Joe Sikowski is a legend in the area. He has also patented this butternut squash veggie spiral. So these are for you all as well.
Thank you very kindly.
Lots of products in here.
That is
I'm a
very kind of
huge
you,
butternut
I should
squash
say.
person, I want you to know.
By the way, Mayor Wu also answered another question I'm sure all of us have had for decades. The plural of squash is squash. She just said it, and I would say
I think so.
I think it's squash.
I
In any
don't
case,
know.
Thank you,
I
Mayor
don't
Wu,
know.
and it's good to see you. Thank
Good
you
to
for
see
joining us.
So Jim was just talking about, his reaction to the election. He was very upset about the deportation part of this, and there are stories in the Globe and all around the country about a lot of people who are petrified about what's going to happen to them. But what did you think about what happened last Tuesday?
I'm still sitting very heavily with the impact, what this means, just sort of knowing very closely the tangible ways that life may change for the city of Boston, just based on what I experienced under a previous administration like this and what we've experienced under the Biden-Harris administration. And, the way that our electoral system works, the country has voted, and we are going to have to accept the consequences of that. But that does mean that local communities are going to have to deal with a whole lot more than, just to maintain where we were and not get pulled back.
How so?
Into.
What kind of things are you talking about?
We are a community here in Boston that is 29% foreign-born residents. Our immigrant community members are a very important part of our community, and the threats, we saw even after 2016 that it's not just how much is actually coming to fruition. And I do believe that this go-round comes with a lot more preparation and a lot more readiness to take action than before.
With Trump, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you see and feel the impact in the community when students don't show up for school anymore, regardless of how clearly we have laid out policies in Boston with the Trust Act being signed in 2014 and specific protections where our local law enforcement does not coordinate on federal immigration enforcement. When the fear is there, it completely changes how residents feel comfortable interacting with her school system, with city services, coming to the library, engaging with law enforcement or first responders, and that makes everyone less safe.
So can we talk about the thing that we were talking about as you were walking in, which is, to me, it's hard to rate the worst of the agenda, but apparently this is a day one item, this mass deportation thing. We're a sanctuary city. What do you say to people who are living in the kind of fear you talked about? What is the city and the state going to do to protect them?
So it's important to know that there are laws on the books already here in Boston. And again, as early as 2014, we as a city passed protections with, I should say, full support of local government leaders and law enforcement leaders. The Boston Trust Act puts strict prohibitions on local law enforcement from being pulled into becoming the enforcement arm for the whims of whatever the sort of approach of federal immigration law might be. There are certain exceptions when there's for example, a particular type of warrant around particular types of criminal activity where and coordination allowed that around human trafficking and drug trafficking and cyber crimes and some specific instances. But the idea that certain local law enforcement agencies will be required or will be expected to participate in mass deportations of residents who have not been part of serious criminal activity just to fulfill this campaign promise, this is not something that is possible under the laws in Boston.
When you say not possible that they would get assistance from local law enforcement. But does that stop federal authorities from carrying out Trump's mass deportation plans in Boston without the assistance of the locals?
So, I mean, we are trying to figure out, and we're going to be working very closely. We have some conversations already mapped out with those who will know best and how to manage for every bit of scenario planning in this instance. I think there are, capacity limitations at different levels, and some of what has been promised does rely on having the full cooperation of local agencies. Now, in places where that is not the case, how much could still happen and how much is going to be pushed, we still have other mechanisms where we can identify spaces that might be most targeted and think about protections there. So we're working through all of that internally now. And, 69 days to go until inauguration. We're counting that down.
By the way, the number, and you can start lining up, I'm sorry, Marjorie, is 877-301-8970. We'll get to your calls and texts in a few minutes.
But Mary, one of the things that was really clear in this election is that a lot of talk about the Democrats losing the working class. And one of the things we've learned is many working class voters, including people who are recent immigrants themselves, felt a huge resentment to the numbers of people that were coming into their cities and towns. And I remember when for the brief period, it was only a few months, but the Melnia Cass Recreation Center was closed for a while, and kids in Roxbury, their programs were lost. That was used as a place for migrants to live. There was a resentment, the idea that these people, in quotes, are not going to Wellesley or Brookline. They're going to the Bostons and the Lawrences and the Fall Rivers and New Bedford, and people feel that their schools have been impacted. People feel that their rents have been impacted. These concerns are real. So how do you bridge those two divides,
I think with or without immigration as the sort of most visible issue, whenever, it's somewhat human nature that when you feel like you are losing out, when you feel like you don't have enough of what you need or you're not able to support your own family, there's a little bit of sort of shutting down in terms of understanding where the opportunities might be going instead. And we have the ability in a country that is as well resourced as the United States and in many cities and communities to move out of that dynamic, but it has to start with moving away from this sort of shrinking pie, because that naturally leads to pitting different communities against each other. And we have, I think, been working very hard in Boston and in Massachusetts to be the example of a community that is safe, that is welcoming, that is growing, that is striving to have enough resources for all. Now, we are in some ways have been such a desirable place to live that our housing stock is now far below what it needs to be given the demand and the interest in living here. And that, I think, is one of the biggest barriers that we need to understand is how do we demonstrate and communicate that it's possible for everyone in our communities to thrive. We do need more coordination and resources. If anything, we need more funding from the federal government around housing, transportation, infrastructure. The results of having the federal pandemic relief funds have been very clear in terms of expanding who has access to opportunity and how we incorporate everyone into the strongest version of our society. But the housing shortage, the feeling of grocery prices being out of control, costs being out of control all around the country, that really had an impact on the election.
It's the day after Veterans Day. I just want to mention in terms of housing, you have something to talk about in terms of veterans housing. Tell us about that.
Well, we took the step of trying to move as quickly as possible in adopting a provision that was made available through the HERO Act that was passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor, which allows for a greater property tax exemption for veterans now in the city of Boston. We've opted in. And so just, one additional measure to try to cushion what can be very difficult in a high cost of living community.
A couple of more election questions quickly if we can, and then we'll get to your calls at 877-301-8970. We did some back of the envelope math this morning. I hope it's right, and correct me if I'm wrong. Turnout from 2020 in the presidential down from 293,000 to just under 250,000. You're nodding in agreement. Trump's percentage of the vote went up 5%. Briefly, how do you explain both of those?
Well, some of this is there was just widespread mail voting in 2020. And so the changes because of the pandemic for public safety, or for public health and safety, meant that more people were being proactively mailed ballots, I think, in many places. And that availability definitely expanded the electorate in ways that we had not seen prior to that. Mail-in voting remains a really big source of how the votes come in, even in the non-presidential elections that have happened since 2020.
So you think it explains that huge drop?
No, I mean, it's also true in communities everywhere that Democratic turnout was lower, and I'm not familiar with all of their mail versus not mail, but I think people might have felt like they're, again, a lot of confusion around various issues and the interplay of it, or the mix of social media and what information was getting across, the feeling of whether our votes actually mattered that much when there wasn't something else sort of high profile on the ballot here. It's impossible a week after the election to really untangle the sort of many influences and impacts on how people made their decisions. We are just going to have to have those conversations and ask those questions, and then be prepared to take the feedback that we get and make some changes.
Do you feel like you were an active surrogate for originally for Biden, then for Harris? Do you feel you or any of the other Democratic leaders failed? I mean, this is a 5% increase in the Democratic city of Boston. Marjorie's from Fall River, one of the bluest cities, went for Trump. Did the Democratic infrastructure in the state not do their job well enough?
I think there are, again, a lot of different pieces to this that it's hard to untangle, and I believe that the shift in social media was a factor in this, right? The fact that one of the biggest platforms is owned by someone, a billionaire, who really by the end, through the algorithms and everything else, you could not sign on to that site without seeing the direct political push from the owner.
We're obviously talking about Elon Musk and
who's
Twitter,
going to be
X,
now very active in setting up what comes next. And, so in times where I think there's been a disintegration of trust in politics and government, especially at the federal level, local institutions become all the more important. State and local government, libraries, schools, local media, having this platform as a way for people to still feel like they can get access to some of their elected officials and ask questions on a regular basis. That has always been important for democracy, and even more important now. We're seeing Blue Sky, for example, as an alternative or another option for social media. I have sort of jumped back in on that one and have seen the swell of people moving over to that platform, which has different controls around how you can regulate for more productive conversations and block some of the toxicity, or even sort of remove some of the bots and those who are not actually real people on that platform. And we are going to need that kind of infrastructure to rebuild from the ground up. How people get information, how people share their views, how they can trust the information that they see, and then turn that into actual action at the policy level.
Two more very quick election things, and we finally get to the calls, I promise. There was a mess, inadequate number of ballots at a number of polling places. The Secretary of State apparently is appalled. I assume you're upset too. Bill Galvin said a receivership, as happened once in the past, might be the appropriate course. Would you support a receivership for the election commissioner?
I think the city, the administration, we welcome any resources and support and partnership with the Secretary of State's office. There's really no one else around the country that has as much experience and knowledge in terms of how elections should run. And it is unacceptable. I mean, there's no other way to describe it as compared to, it's just unacceptable.
You know why they weren't even answering the phones? I mean, that's the thing that is most incredible.
Yeah, so I will say, we're doing in addition to working with the Secretary of State's office, we're doing our own deep internal review just to understand every piece of what happened. That will take a little bit of time because the elections department, as every department, has had some really important closeout work to do. There's, some of the overseas ballots are still coming in, and there are some regularly scheduled audits that happen just to double check and triple check election results. So they've had additional responsibility since then, and we will get to all of it deeply once those are concluded. But the initial review suggests that there was a mistake in the formula and a new formula that was created because now with mail-in ballots being a larger part of the electorate, they've been setting new protocols around which ones are counted in advance centrally versus which ones are sent back to the precincts on election day to be fed into the machines. And in some of the formulas around accounting for those precincts, they shortchanged how many ballots were needed at the other precincts. And mistakes happen. Mistakes happen across any large institution, any organization. The question is, why did it then get to a point where people were not able to respond as quickly, and what did that response look like? And so that I think is the bigger focus of how do we ensure that we have systems that are redundant and have multiple ways where no single issue becomes then a reason for undue delay that can lead to disenfranchisement.
Let's take some calls.
Paul in Braintree, you are first with Mayor Michelle Wu. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Paul.
Thank you, Marjorie, Jim, Honorable Mayor. My question really seems inconsequential by today's standards, but it's the condition of Boylston Street. It's nearly impossible to navigate it, let's say, from the Prudential Center to Arlington Street.
Amen, Paul.
Between the valet parking, the bus lane, the bike lane, it kind of resembles now Hanover Street the day before Thanksgiving. I mean, it's just, I don't know why it's in that condition, but it's just impossible as a driver to go, as I do every Sunday now, from the Prudential Center down to Arlington Street. So basically, that's my question.
Okay.
I hope you can address it.
You want to know what you can do about it. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate the feedback. I think, some of the changes that we're having to make in different parts of our street design citywide is because traffic has become an overwhelming concern. And given Boston's historic narrower streets, there's only so much that we can do in terms of trying to find new space for travel. We have to move more people on the space that we already have. And as more vehicle traffic has happened, that becomes increasingly dangerous for all, pedestrians, cyclists, everyone else who's using the roadways as well. And so some of the separation is to make sure that there are ways where heavily trafficked areas that have a large proportion of public transit or other modes of transportation, that those can be efficient and safe. The changes that were put in place on Boylston Street, I think we continue to measure what the impact is, and we'll be able to report back on all of that. It takes a little while sometimes for all the street changes to settle, but by and large, we wanted to create separation so that there was not just a jumble and a chaos of who drives where, what having to worry about someone darting over or being in front and mixed in. And so from a safety perspective, we do prioritize making sure that our streets are safe for everyone.
I would like to commend the traffic department for where I drive every time I leave here, which is a new change in the light at the corner of Boylston Street and Dartmouth Street. So drivers are not running over the pedestrians who are trying to cross at the walk sign there. They've changed the light so you're not going back and forth, and it's a big improvement. So whoever
speak
did
for
that.
yourself. So can we do something
okay. First of all, I will say sometimes what gets interpreted as causing traffic is actually not as related to it. And so what we know from the data is that traffic doesn't usually come from the number of lanes or this or that. It's from how you use the curb and how the signals are timed. So having the lights actually match up makes a big, big difference.
Signals.
Having spaces where
they're huge.
You have takeout spaces for 5 minutes or 15 minutes instead of people then having to double or triple park, that makes a big difference too. Getting transit lanes prioritized where the buses tend to be stopping every so often and blocking everyone, that makes a difference. We've been, I think I might have shared this before on this show a couple months ago, but we're one of 2 cities working with Google right now to use AI and machine learning to analyze the data they have on where traffic pops up, because they have the red, yellow, green on their Google Maps. And in the places where we have used that data and changed the light timing, where the lights actually were too short or too long in one direction or another with the cross street, we've seen stop and go traffic go down by 50%. So we need to do more of that in really understanding what are the tweaks that we can still make to just make sure the streets are moving as well as they can in their current condition, and then what are the larger changes that are needed.
Can we go one street over for some upbeat news from my perspective? What's happening on Newbury Street in December?
For the first time ever, we are having a holiday open Newbury. This was from feedback from some of the merchants and small business owners who are on Newbury Street that, in fact, having a dedicated focus on holiday shopping could be a big benefit. And so I don't remember the exact dates off the top of my head. 1st and 8th of December, Newbury Street will be closed to vehicular traffic in order for pedestrians and everyone to come out and enjoy and get your shopping done locally.
Jill in Concord, you're on with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about. I'm getting an echo.
Well, I know it's only
okay.
on your end, and our apologies.
Yep.
Just keep talking. We're fine here. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll try to talk and
I'm
not
so
listen
sorry.
to myself.
Yep.
I have a question about projects that are in the pipeline for climate mitigation. And I understand that the city has to have a balanced budget, and so they haven't counted on the money from the IRA. But I'm expecting that the Trump administration will try to get out of paying that money, and I'm wondering if there are any efforts to try to get that money before the projects are, quote, fully operational, which is the language in the IRA.
We got it. Thank you so much for your call.
Jill.
Thank you. This has already been an area of great focus for us locally and in conversations with the current administration federally as well, that all the federal dollars that we have been awarded, we need to know what is the plan for being able to guarantee as much as possible that they will be spent and that we are minimizing the risk that they might be withdrawn or canceled. And so those are for the ones that have already been awarded. The other projects, provisions that are available under the Inflation Reduction Act or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or some of the other provisions that were passed, it's not, there still may be a period of time where legislation has to be changed before something happens. And so we're working to go as fast as we can in analyzing that and spending what we can spend to get those projects out the door and funded.
Jill, thanks for the call.
We got to take a break, but real quick before we do, a texter says that the new bridge from Charlestown to Boston is beautiful, but the texter wants to know, since it's dedicated to Bill Russell, the former great player on the Boston Celtics, could the bridge be lit with green lights instead of blue lights, especially on nights that the Celtics are playing? What do you think, Mayor Wu?
That's an interesting one, right?
I think
it's
so.
like the light that shows what the weather is on certain days. And this would be what showed. Well, we'll probably need a Bruins color too for Bruins
That's
game.
right.
So anyway, I'll look into it.
Okay. We're talking to the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. She's going to be with us till the top of the hour, taking our questions and yours and your texts as well, as many as we can fit in. 877-301-8970 is the number.
Trusted, local news.
Massport is aggressively expanding its seaport-based cruise ship business.
44 new vessels will cascade into the market between now and 2028.
GBH News.
Spewing their foul air.
It's just not sustainable to keep going bigger and bigger and bigger endlessly.
Here for what matters to you. GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion, with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And the University of New England, offering undergraduate and graduate programs in Portland, Maine, on the ocean in Biddeford, Maine, in Morocco, and online. The University of New England, une.edu. And Barrett Tree Service East. Their team of arborists and plant healthcare professionals provides sustainable management for the care of trees, plants, and lawns in the communities where they live and serve. Learn more at barretttreeeast.com. And Blythewald, presenting the big, beautiful bamboo birds. Bamboo sculptures ranging in size from 15 to 30 feet tall. Visitors can see the giant owl, queenfisher, peahen, and more all around the gardens. Tickets at blythewald.org.
The annual UN Climate Change Conference, COP29, is underway in Baku, Azerbaijan. Delegates from nearly 200 countries are mapping out a global green energy transition. We hear about that vision and how it might be impacted by the re-election of Donald Trump. That story and more international news next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery Egan, Jim Browder. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined by the mayor of Boston, as she's kind enough to do every month for an hour until the noon hour. You can call or text her at 877-301-8970. Before I go back to the calls, I want, on Marjorie's behalf and mine, I want to apologize for this everyday echo thing that a lot of you are struggling with. We're mortified. We're really working hard to fix this, and we hope the fix is imminent, so our sincere apologies. Another Marjorie in Charlestown, talking to Mayor Wu. Hello there, Marjorie.
Hi, Mayor Wu.
Hello.
Hi.
I think you're fabulous, which is why I want to ask for your insight about this horrible situation whereby our students, especially in East Boston High School, I read that article in the Globe about the athletes being stranded at their school because a school bus never came to pick them up to take them to their games. And I understand that it's not just East Boston, it's English High School and a couple others. I just really want to know what you're going to do about it.
And by the way, that game had to be canceled because there was no bus to take them from East Boston.
It was just terrible.
Yeah. Mayor Wu, thank you, Marjorie.
Thanks, Marjorie. Yeah, I am keeping tabs as well from my household. My fourth grader, you're eligible to play on the elementary school soccer team once you get into fourth grade, and so he's been going every morning before school, waking up early to get there for practice. And they also had a game canceled because of similar bus issues, and another one that had to be majorly delayed. And you just, as a parent, you feel the impacts of that. And this is a longstanding issue that we are working very hard on. I think the biggest the biggest underlying issue is that we need to have this baked into contracts with our drivers, and therefore the availability of buses, the guarantee that those routes will be bid on and covered. And so I know our drivers work incredibly hard, and we've already seen remarkable improvements over the first couple months of school in implementing the new app that's going to help us do even better in terms of on-time pickup and drop-off for school itself. But having the extracurriculars covered also is really important. We had an issue, again, just from my own child's perspective, where when a regular school bus or one of the yellow school buses wasn't available, they actually went to one of the other coach buses, and then that one was too big to even turn down the street of the school, and then they were stuck for 30 minutes anyway trying to get the police department to tow a car so they could make the turn. And so these are things that should not be part of what students, student athletes, school educators and families have to think about. It should be a given that you put in the time, you play sports, you are involved in the arts, you have a field trip. Transportation should just be seamless, and we're working really hard to get there.
Marjorie, thank you very much for the call. 877-301-8970.
Just one more thing about this. Is it that the traffic is terrible? I mean, I get the bus with the football players, that was different, but the lateness thing, is that what's going on? I mean, why does this happen? I know it's better, but
in general, just to get to school?
Yeah.
So we're actually already at and exceeding where the district has been in previous years with on-time performance by this point. The first couple weeks were rocky because for the first time ever, they were moving away from a clipboard and paper routing system to an app that actually showed real-time GPS data, as well as checking off which students were getting on and off the bus at each stop. Previously, we never knew which students were actually riding the bus and whether they made it or not. And so now families have access to seeing exactly where their student is. They get an estimated drop-off time based on the GPS data that accounts for traffic. And feedback from community members has been very good that this is now, you just have a peace of mind. It took a while to get used to how that system was implemented, both with the GPS data that was uploaded every week, and now we're at the point where we're starting to be able to really understand how to make even more improvements. Other year before this, we kind of topped out at how well we could do with on-time performance, and now given these new tools and a little bit more access to technology, we still have improvements that we're confident that we can continue improving that number for the rest of the year.
Bob, if you approach the mic here, we'll get to you right after this next question, so you're ready to go. Can you give us a quick update on what's happening with the tax shifting commercial to residential to commercial shift that you negotiate with the business community? Have you gotten an assurance from the Senate leadership that now that business is on board, there's going to be a yes vote there?
I think the legislature was quite clear that they wanted to see consensus from particular stakeholder groups that included the business community. We got there, and it's been, I think recognized that took a lot of work and was exactly what they were hoping for. It passed through the city council with a 12-1 vote, and was just filed last week up at the State House by Rep. Rob Consalvo, who also took it last time around. And so now it would have to move through those same channels with the House and then the Senate. There's a little wrinkle because of now they're in informal session versus formal session, but we are pushing hard and just trying to manage the clock at this point.
But no assurance yet from the Senate.
I think the Senate was pretty clear that they wanted to see some changes. Mm-hmm. We updated and amended the legislation with all of those changes and are following their guidance and their requests for how to feed that back through the process. So at this point, I believe the city has done everything that we need to do in coming to consensus and having lots and lots of discussions on how to measure and prove what the impact would be. And now we are just watching the legislative process.
Okay, very quick response. I assume you saw Joan Bernanke's column saying, is she full of resolve or stubborn? Which are you?
I mean, I never imagined I would be potentially described as more stubborn than Mayor Menino.
Fair enough.
Having known the mayor,
I wonder why that could be.
I take it as a good thing. I'm going to fight for our residents no matter what it takes. And at the end of the day, that particular issue that she was highlighting, we got it done. We reached consensus, and residents will be far better for it.
Bob is here at the mic at the library. Welcome, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mayor Wu, great to see you. Glad you're in City Hall. It was just a joyous occasion to see you become mayor of the city. And I have to say, it's a pleasure listening to you. I love hearing you're very articulate in what you say, and I think very forthcoming as well. So I'll also add, I was an election poll worker last 4 elections. It's been great to be on the inside to see how everything works. Very reassuring. So thank you for all that you're doing there. I have a question actually about bike lanes and traffic. I've noticed with all the changes, I do like a lot of the changes to the roadways, the traffic, the bike lanes. They seem to be getting better. Unfortunately, I'm also noticing that a lot of the bike lanes are put on the worst surfaces of the roads, on the sides. And I just actually had an accident last week, angry from the election, went out biking, and I had a spill because of the road surfaces. What can we do about improving these road surfaces, and how can we make it easier to report these problems?
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, and thank you for highlighting that. The importance of our infrastructure decisions can't just stop once the design has been made. It's really very much about maintenance, about ease of accessibility, and how, as you point out, that continues to happen year after year after year, even after the change potentially has been made. So 311 is still the best and fastest way to report issues, whether it is in the car lane or the bike lane or a street light. We pride ourselves on having very strict customer service standards, so that with potholes, for example, the goal is to fill them with a specific turnaround. When the weather gets colder, it gets a little bit more complicated in terms of the temperature that's needed to do that. But the best way for us to be able to respond to those structurally is to know where they are and then have that get into our system.
Mayor Wu, one of the great embarrassments, at least to me, in Boston and my hometown of Cambridge, it was the pathetically low percentage of city contracting that went to black and brown-owned businesses. I know in Boston it was somewhere in the 1.2% range a couple of years ago. In Cambridge it was under 1%. I know there's been an increase. How significant are we talking about?
Yeah, we have, so just this last year, we have hit more than $100 million going to what are called MWBE businesses, Minority and Women Business Enterprises is the technical term. And we have seen, even last year to this year, a 40% jump. I think we are, I think the number is somewhere around 12, 15.
That's including women-owned businesses, though, right?
I don't believe, okay, I'll make sure I get the exact numbers. We have had a very big swing in this, increase in this, and it's because of changes in policy that were put in place around how RFPs are going out, changes in measurements, more certification processes, more outreach to make sure that we are getting businesses in the door. And recently, Cambridge reached out to us, and we're very proud to sign an MOU with that city, whereby they're looking to increase their numbers as supplier diversity numbers as well, but rather than starting from scratch, they're now partnering with Boston. So we will help certify businesses in Cambridge that could qualify for MWBE certification, and they will source their purchasing from the entire pool, including Boston certified MWBE. So it's a win-win all around, and we've now set up the infrastructure with tracking, dashboards, planning out in advance what those contracts will be so that companies can get ready. And it's a good model for any other governments or really any other major purchasers, the hospital industry, the higher ed. There are lots of ways in which we could be supporting our local economy.
Ali from Cambridge, you're on with the mayor. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Ali.
Good morning to you. Thank you so much for taking my call. I have two questions that I try to be very brief. The first one is the question that Marjorie asked, and I believe Mayor who dodged it, so I have to repeat it. So the resources of the city are limited from accommodation, medical centers, and the rest of those. And there are illegal immigrants and also regular citizens. City decided to bring and give those limited resources to those illegal immigrants and therefore hurting the regular citizen. That's my question number one. Question number two is that the nation has voted, not only by electoral vote, but also by popular vote. And the President-elect Trump, on the top of his policies, was deporting of illegal immigrants. Now you are, that you have been always pretending that defending democracy, planning to use more resources of the city to confront the will of the people. What is the justification?
Ali, we got it.
We got it.
We understand them both. Mayor.
So, okay, so I think I want to try to understand your first question also was whether we are taking resources away from residents who are not undocumented, whether it's immigrants who have legal status and citizens, taking that away in order to give to undocumented residents. I think that's a little bit of an unfair characterization. Oftentimes, actually most often, the city is using sources of funding to address particular challenges, and especially in this case, that come from the federal or state government that are designated for specific purposes. And so often we are drawing on grants or funding from the federal government that are to manage a shelter system where we have new immigrant families or at the city level, individuals arriving. And it's not as if that funding was transferable to other uses, and it's not as if we all of a sudden changed our budget and decided to take funding that was allocated for another purpose and redirect it to that instead. That is at the city level. There might be other conversations at other levels of government. So I think it's, we understand, for example, that shelter space is limited, but so far the city of Boston has really, really stretched along with our partners, and we are doing our best to manage the crises that have been presented to us with the resources that we have, but that does not come, I do not subscribe to the idea that we had changed our budget in order to do that. Again, this is just at the city level. The second point that you make about whether Boston, in some of our actions, for example, around, maybe you're referring to the earlier conversation where we are not having local law enforcement carry out the full instructions of the federal immigration enforcement agencies, is that contradicting the will of the people? If you look at the will of the people in Boston, nearly 80% of residents voted for the Harris campaign and that ticket. And so, maybe if we were living in a different part of the country, if we were, responding at a different level of government, but our charge here is to take care of the residents of Boston and to use the resources that we have from all the sources that are available to get things done on the issues that matter in Boston. That has been our charge before last Tuesday's election, and it continues to be. And so we're very specific in what we focus on at the local level, and we're also very, very clear that Boston always intends to be a community where we highlight what is possible when everybody benefits from our community being welcoming, safe, prosperous across each and every part of that community.
Thank you.
Ellen in the North End.
I'm sorry. I thought we were going to rate. Oh, Ellen, quickly if you can, because we want to try to get Rachel in here too. Quickly, Ellen.
Hi, Jim. This is Ellen Hume. I'm a fan of Mayor Wu. That was literally the issue I was trying to ask about. I know Boston's a sanctuary city, and people are wondering what we can do to help protect some of the workers and others who've been here for many years without documents, who are really important part of our community. Is there going to be a task force or someone we can contact to be helpful?
Thanks, Ellen.
Thanks, Ellen. Great to hear from you. I think there are many local organizations that have for a very long time been advocating on behalf of immigrant residents, whether that is MIRA, the Mass Immigrant Refugee Alliance, I'm not exactly sure what A is, or Lawyers for Civil Rights, or other groups that are various worker centers. We are going to be working closely to get their best insights and directions on what to do. And we will be formulating some of those plans and sharing them out.
Rachel at the library, we only have a couple of minutes left, so brief if you can, please.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wu. It's actually my dream job to be the mayor of Boston, so it's such an honor. My question is specifically what's being done to address the cost of housing in Boston. Myself, I'm 27. Every single one of my friends, it is the number one issue of why we would move out of state. It is too insane to buy anything apartment, house here. So thank you very much.
Rachel, thank you a lot. You have about a minute and a half.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Okay, you should come work for the city then, if that's the case. We should talk. You're absolutely right, and this is why we are throwing everything we have at housing. We use the majority of our federal recovery dollars for housing affordability, for moving the pipeline forward on housing that's already been permitting more affordable housing, using city land to create more space to drive down the costs of what it would take. We're also reviewing every bit of our internal development processes just to make the processes more streamlined, faster, more predictable, because we don't want to add to any part of the cost of what it takes to build. We will never be the lowest land cost community. We're very dense. We'll never be the lowest labor cost community. We have very high standards around labor. And so we need to make sure that the regulations are smooth and efficient and as streamlined as possible. And we also are trying our best to boost home ownership, partner with outside entities, taking some of our reserves funding and creating a revolving fund that will come back into the reserves after it closes the gap in financing for some projects, brings them back in. We have about 30,000 units of housing in Boston that are already permitted or already approved, but have not started construction. If we can just get those over the line, that in and of itself will be a huge impact in the supply.
30 seconds. Is any of the $4 billion housing bond bill that the governor standing right there says the largest in the state's history, any of it trickle down to Boston quickly?
Yes. So
already?
There's funding around office to residential conversions. There's funding for more creation of public housing. Okay. There's funding around the Momentum Fund that would spark private developments. And so some of these are yet to be fully allocated at the local level, but Boston definitely will qualify.
You didn't know how you were going to vote on the MCAS question. How'd you vote?
So, okay, now how many minutes do we have?
30 seconds.
Okay.
How'd you vote? We'll continue it next month.
I voted no. And not because I believe that the MCAS is what we should be holding up, but because if the question were just around the city of Boston, I would have voted yes.
Support for GBH comes from you.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business.
The hometown team won't be horrible forever. We'll discuss that and more with NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey, including how Charlie Baker, do you remember him, is doing running the NCAA.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then, with voters rejecting question 5 on tipped wages, we'll talk about what that means for the industry with food and policy writer Corby Kummer. And our text prompt at 877-301-8970. We're inspired by a book that was finally returned to the Worcester Public Library last week, 51 years after it was checked out. What's the longest you procrastinated on a task that would have otherwise taken?
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Republicans are on the cusp of retaining control of the House, which would give the GOP a trifecta come January, control over both chambers of Congress and the White House. Speaker Mike Johnson says it's time to move on and turn the page in the next Congress.
This is something that the American people desperately need and deserve. We're going to raise an America First banner above this place. And you saw a demographic shift that I was talking about on the campaign trail for over a year, who came on board with us because they believed in what we were saying. They believed the answers that we were providing for all the great challenges facing the country.
Republicans are closer to claiming House control. 218 seats are needed to hold the majority. President-elect Donald Trump has signaled there could be big changes coming to the Justice Department and the FBI. NPR's Carrie Johnson reports on the transition process.
The Attorney General is going to be the most important job after the president's and the next administration. That's according to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Justice Clarence Thomas is also in the mix to lead the Justice Department. FBI Director Chris Wray has more than 2 years left on his term, but he's had a tense relationship with Trump, who may want to replace him. An FBI official tells NPR Wray continues to oversee day-to-day operations and is actively planning to lead the Bureau into next year and beyond. Carrie Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
Saudi Arabia has hosted leaders from the Middle East and Muslim-majority countries for a summit. They ended with a statement calling for a halt of global arms shipments to Israel and for its suspension at the United Nations. NPR's Aya Batrawi reports the summit did not commit nations to abide by specific measures.
Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman opened the summit by reaffirming support for a Palestinian state, denouncing Israeli attacks on Iran, and accusing Israel of carrying out a, quote, genocide in Gaza, which Israel denies. Arab leaders, many of whom are opposed to Hamas, have been divided on how to contain the war, which has spread to Lebanon. And countries like Egypt and the UAE have kept ties with Israel, even using their ports for Israeli shipments throughout the war. The summit is the second of its kind to be held in Riyadh since the Hamas-led attacks of last year that killed 1,200 people in Israel. Israel's military has since killed at least 43,000 Palestinians, most of them women and children, according to Gaza's health ministry. Aya Batrawi, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow was down 252 points. This is NPR.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Governor Maura Healey is asking everyone to avoid outdoor burning until drought conditions improve, as wildfires and brush fires consume hundreds of acres across the state. The governor says now is not the time to burn leaves or light a fire out back. Healey visited a fire department in Middleton this morning as the record-breaking fire season continues. The state's chief fire warden, Dave Solino, says firefighters have been out straight for weeks.
We've had 247 fires across the state for November, and that's for almost 700 acres burned. So we've had some large fires out there. Some of them have grown. Some of them came out of containment because of the wind event.
And wind gusts prompted meteorologists to post a red flag warning until 6 tonight. The state has banned outdoor burning, and several local fire departments have adopted similar bans. Former Massachusetts Air National Guardsman Jack Teixeira faces sentencing this afternoon in Boston federal court for leaking highly classified military documents online. He pleaded guilty in March to violating the Espionage Act. Prosecutors are asking the judge to sentence the 22-year-old to nearly 17 years in prison. They say he used his top security clearance to access hundreds of highly classified documents, including some related to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and shared them on the app Discord. Defense attorneys are seeking an 11-year sentence. In sports, the Bruins skate against the Blues tonight. Sunny, breezy, relatively mild. Highs in the 50s this afternoon. Clear skies tonight, chilly, lows in the 30s. Sunny tomorrow, and also chilly, highs only in the 40s. Right now, it's 52 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com, and the Doris Duke Foundation.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by former head of the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts, Justice Margaret Marshall, who gave us, I got it wrong before, Jim, the important thing is gay marriage. Gay marriage. She gave us gay marriage, and it went national shortly thereafter. And we're going to be joined as well by national security expert Juliette Kayyem. And a reminder of our text prompt at 877-301-8970. This forgotten library book was returned to the Worcester Public Library after 51 years. Good thing Worcester got rid of their late fees for library books. We're going to read your thoughts on the little items on your own to-do list that you just can't help but keep putting off. We've gotten a couple of good ones so far. We'll read them later in this hour.
We're joined now by Trenni Casey. Oh, no, Trenni Casey. I was about to say that's her wrong name, but I forgot. No. The other one was her, whatever. She's an anchor and reporter. You know who she is, regardless, for NBC Sports Boston and a BPR contributor. Trenni, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you guys.
So let's start trying a little upbeat clip from inside the New England Patriots locker room after the win this weekend versus the Chicago Bears. You'll hear Patriots cornerback Jonathan Jones.
The coach said it's playing complementary football, offense, defense, special teams. It ain't no special victory to how you win in this league. It's simple. Sticking together and playing complementary football. We keep doing that, put our head down. We're going to go some places. Hey, stack some wins. Stack some wins. How do we feel about coming to the winning city and getting the wins against your Bears?
That was pretty great. I hadn't heard that before. That was great.
So he's really enthusiastic about the prospects. Should the rest of us be?
Listen, I do think that you can walk away. Make no mistake about it, and obviously I'm a little biased because I grew up in Wisconsin. I'm a huge Packers fan, but the Bears still suck. And so, you know, they're a team in disarray. They're fading away from their head coach, Matt Eberflus. A lot of people think he's going to lose his job. Caleb Williams is playing behind a terrible offensive line.
Number one draft pick
ahead of Drake May. I think if you watch the game, I think you feel better about Drake May than you do about Caleb Williams. But listen, just a couple of weeks ago, the Patriots went to London to play the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team in disarray, the coach on the hot seat, and they got their doors blown off. So this is a team that, since Gerard Mayo called them soft, has taken it to heart and has played team football. They've played tougher football. They've been in games. Listen, they're not that talented. They need to get they need to get more talented, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. But they're playing for Gerard Mayo and his coaches in a way that they haven't before. So when Jonathan Jones says, let's stack some wins, and you look at their schedule, you start to think maybe they can. They've got the Rams coming in this week. The Rams just lost last night, Monday Night Football, to the Miami Dolphins, who were struggling. They're a team that is floundering a little bit. So they have an opportunity to maybe piece some things together. Now, if you're a Patriots fan, you don't want them to piece things together so much, because otherwise, right now, they've slipped, I think, out of, as of yesterday, I don't know what it is with Miami winning and the Rams losing, but the Patriots had slipped out of the top 5 for draft picks, and you need talent. So you do want them to at least have good draft positioning so that they can get some talent. You don't want them to be too good this year, but this is starting to look like maybe Gerard Mayo has a little something going and something to build on.
Well, don't you say, this 22-year-old kid.
Oh my God, he's unbelievable.
I actually watched the whole game, which I almost never do.
I fell asleep in the fourth quarter.
And you have to do it for a living. The poise of this, for those that even are not football fans, he's running around. And everybody knows from a couple of weeks ago, the game they lost, when he ran around for 12 seconds, which is an eternity, and threw a touchdown pass. He's running around, he's about to get tackled, and he throws a pass with his left hand.
I know.
So that he doesn't get tackled behind the line of scrimmage.
He's right-handed.
I mean, he's right-handed.
And he threw a pass with his left hand.
It wasn't intended to complete it. It was intended to throw it away so he didn't lose 5 or 10 yards.
Right.
But the quick thinking was amazing for a kid.
And there were even times when he did just throw the ball away, where instead of taking a sack and he didn't see the running lane there, he was smart and just threw it away. And you could tell the difference. If you're watching Caleb Williams, who again was the number 1 overall draft pick, the quote-unquote best quarterback, best player in the entire draft last year, and then you juxtapose that against the way you saw Drake May play, you look at Drake May and you're like, this kid looks like a franchise quarterback, good decision-making, big arm, athletic. And I'm not sure if you guys heard this story or not, but they had a bad practice on Wednesday. They were making a lot of mistakes. He dropped a couple of snaps. Wide receivers were dropping passes. And so after practice, he goes up to Alex Van Pelt and he said, do you mind if I address the team?
Because he's the offensive coordinator.
He's the offensive coordinator. And he says, sure. And we hear about it after the fact that these guys responded to this 22-year-old. He's the youngest quarterback in the league.
He is?
Drake May is the youngest quarterback in the league.
That's
and
great.
He fired his team up. They regrouped. They had a good practice on Thursday, and then they won on Sunday. He's a leader. He's a natural-born leader.
You know, I'm embarrassed by the following. You and we have discussed flag football a lot. And the reason we talk about it all the time is because I'm concussion obsessed, as I hope all of us are. And obviously, as I read in an article today, the average number of hits in a tackle football game, I think, is something like 378
Oh, yeah,
or 278.
this was in this flag football article.
And the number in a flag football game is 8. And so it's unbelievable. However, this is the part I'm embarrassed about. I kept thinking about these big, huge athletes, men, instead of getting concussions, are going to be healthier and safer, and we get to see their bodies, we get to watch them play. This almost whole article is about something I never thought about. Flag football is a huge sport for women already. So, I mean, that's another huge plus and we'll be in the Olympics as both both a men and women's
Men's
sport.
and women's teams will compete in flag football in the 2028
How big is
Olympics.
women's flag football already?
It's growing, and you have, I think, the article in front of
Yeah.
you, so I'm going to try and remember the numbers, but I think there's been something like a 60 or 70% or maybe even 100% increase year over year in flag football programs geared towards young women in this country. States are starting to make it a varsity sport. Massachusetts, I think in the 25-26 season, will make it a varsity sport here for young women to...
Listen to this, high school level, I assume nationally, 43,000 girls played last year, only 21,000 last
Yes,
year.
it's 100% gain in number of people over a year, and the number of people who are participating in flag football. It gives, listen, there are a lot of female football fans out there, but there's never been a path to play. I mean, the reality is that a lot of times you just sort of don't grow at the rate, and it's hard. It's really, unless we've seen women be, kickers, soccer players be kickers on high school football teams, but I'm not sure I can think of a time where there was a top-level female football player on a tackle football team.
Well, the Renegades, the Boston team. We had
but
some
on
people
a
men's
football team. Like
Isn't
if you're
the
in high
quarterback
school.
of the Renegades your trainer or something?
She used to be, yes. Do you know she's a pilot now?
No, she's fat. What's her name? She's fat.
Allison?
She was terrific.
She's terrific.
She was terrific. Go ahead.
But I can imagine, what would Allison and some of these other women, if they would have had this option, they could have played football when they were, peewees or high school age. It just gives women another opportunity. And honestly, there's been a growth and an explosion of interest in women's sports. I'm sure you guys saw, and I actually forgot to send you this story, that Whoopi Goldberg is starting the All Women's Sports Network, AWSN. It's going to be all women's sports. She's investing in it. Obviously, we're seeing contract negotiations right now, collective bargaining agreement in the WNBA. They are asking for more. We have the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League. I just got my little gift box from them with my Boss Nation scarf. As we look forward to that happening, you have the Boston Fleet who are going to play their second season. So here's another opportunity because football's already so big, and if flag football really takes off, this is another avenue for women to look at athletics and sports as a possible, career path. Just like my nephew wants to play, who's by the way so small, he's never going to play pro football. Love you, kid, but you're probably never going to play pro football. Good thing you're really good at math and science. But it gives young women another opportunity and another option for what they may want to do.
On the male side, in the Olympics, I assume NFL players will be allowed to play?
That was in this article as well, that the NFL is really invested. I know I've said this before. They're very invested in growing. In fact, in this article, they talk about how they're giving these flag football leagues, I think sometimes up to $5,000 a team. Nike is donating, like the Patriots Foundation is donating uniforms, footballs, cleats, and giving these teams money to help offset the cost so that everybody can play because they really want to grow flag football. And so to that point, they are going to let active NFL players play flag football in the 2028 Olympics. It's 5-on-5, I believe, is the Olympic sport. It's really skill and agility is the name of the game. It's not a brute physical sport. But I think their hope is by having it highlighted in Los Angeles that people look at it as a viable alternative to tackle football. And I always have wondered this, if that's the direction football goes. If at some point numbers dwindle so much in tackle because of the long-term health risks, is there an avenue for people? Is there an avenue that flag football becomes, our nation's sport?
Yeah, it's fun
By the
to
way,
watch,
can I just say Matt Porter is the guy who wrote this great piece
it's a great
in the
piece
Globe
in the
that
Boston
covers
Globe.
all this sort of. Can I ask one last thing about flag football?
Yeah.
Flag football is where you literally carry like a
Yeah,
flag in your back pocket.
Well, no. You have like a little for me, I guess the comparison I would make if you've ever run a triathlon, there's things called tri belts where you put your number on so that you can just put it on when you run. They look like a tri belt. They look like a belt you'd put around your waist, and the flags hang from them.
And you pull one of them,
and you pull one of them off, and that's a tackle.
And I would like to point out, if I may brag for a moment, that my youngest daughter, who's like little, she's like 5'2" or 5'3".
She's a great athlete,
She's
though.
a really good athlete, and she was MVP of her flag football team, tackling all these women that are much bigger. They're like 5'8", 5'9". So there mustn't be that much of a size thing like there is in football because she's a little bit.
How long has she been playing?
You just need to be fast. She's played in high school. It's all over now.
Flag football in high school?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a formal thing, but they played
club thing or something.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, listen. The best part about this, I was going to say, the best part about this, when I was a kid, same as Marjorie. I mean, we weren't kids at the same time, but
No.
you know what I mean.
Close.
Close.
Unfortunately.
They powder puff. That's what they called it. It was like kind of demeaning, right?
Very.
Like just little girls out there, and we would wear like pink stuff and puffy things to play football, and it was kind of a joke. Like this isn't a joke. This is a legit varsity sport, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I think it would be a lot. Like I said, it's really fun to watch, and I think there'd be far fewer injuries. Okay, let's talk about Charlie Baker running the NCAA. All the changes. He's the president. People know of the NCAA. All these changes, I should say. What's the future? What can he do?
Well, I think that's what he's trying to figure out. The two biggest things they're trying to figure out right now is, like with the National Labor Relations Board, and they specifically talk about the Dartmouth case we've talked about here, where players are unionizing. Will they have athletes be employees? That's one thing. And how do you best serve all athletes when, because of national name, image, and likeness, NIL, the deal that has come through, how do you make it so it's not a top-heavy league where men's football, basketball, and I'd put women's basketball in there now as well, they get all the opportunities and everybody else just sort of falls to the wayside. And that's one of his big challenges. How do you keep amateurs? How do you keep sports equal across the board? How do you prevent them becoming, because apparently they've surveyed athletes, and these athletes do not want to be school employees. They want to be student athletes.
Well, but look who surveyed them, by the way, the people that don't want them to be employees.
Right. So who knows, was it an anonymous survey? Are you afraid if you answer incorrectly? It's like when in your office puts out like a happiness survey, and you're like, well, my employee number is tied to this. If I tell them I think they're all jerks and it stinks here, let's, you're not going to do that. You're like, no, I love working here. It's the best place in the whole world. It might be like that.
Okay, but staying on this, by the way, if you haven't read this piece in the Washington Post, it's really very
dense.
supportive piece of Charlie Baker.
Yes.
The point that isn't made by the writer that I don't get is, I thought one of the proudest moments for Charlie Baker as governor is when he said, I'm never going to vote for Donald Trump. This thing which he wants, and they want, the NCAA, the management of the NCAA, they want Congress to say that student athletes are not, or athletes who are not really students in some cases, are not employees. To have that happen, Congress has to pass it, and there's a guy who has to sign it. That would be President Trump come after January. And the notion that Donald Trump, who I don't know if you know,
would do anything for someone who is against him.
Exactly, and very critical of him, is going to sign something that would probably be the most remembered part of the tenure of Charlie Baker. I thought that should have been in the story, and I'd be curious to hear.
Well, they do talk about his politics a little bit in the story.
Yeah, but not about his Trump relationship, except to say that he didn't vote for him.
In fairness, Jim, I know this article, and I'm sure they could have edited it and added it to the story. But I do wonder, it's such a lengthy story. It's probably a good 15-minute read in the Washington Post. It's very dense. It gets into sort of the nitty-gritty details of everything he's trying to negotiate. The litigation they're facing, like the $2.8 billion of having to back pay athletes and then pay athletes now. And again, the going to Congress, and do they want to keep Congress out of it? Do they want to have a separate governing body? The whole part about Charlie Baker not being a voting board member, but everything goes back to the board, and he has to get the board's approval and the school's approval, who obviously are favoring the school, not the athlete. It's all very complicated. So it's all to say, I wonder if this article was written and the interviews were conducted before the results of the election. And if they didn't have time to get a comment from Charlie Baker on how he would navigate that, and so they've still put the article out.
It was dated before the election.
Yeah.
Well, whenever it was, but it was.
Yeah. So that's and again, not to excuse it, but that would be my guess. If you work on this piece, and it is, I forgot that it was dated before the election. Maybe like a lot of the rest of us living in a blue area, you just didn't think things were going to go that way.
I don't think it's an excuse. One last thing, speaking of the election, the Olympics and the World Cup are coming here during the second Trump presidency. And every time you read these slogans and guiding principles of the World Cup and the Olympics, whether they mean them or not, it's about inclusion, equity, diversity, climate concerns, all those sort of things, all of which the host nation's president does not believe. I don't mean this critically. I do, but I mean it factually. What is the expectation about how they deal with this?
Look at the other places we've had Olympics and World Cups.
That's a good point.
mean, we just had a World Cup in Doha, Qatar, right? That was the main area, the main region. We had an Olympics a few years ago in Sochi, Russia, which immediately following the Olympics, as a distraction,
Beijing.
Putin invaded Crimea.
Yep.
We've had 2 Olympics in the last 16 years in China, in Beijing, including the Winter Olympics just a couple of years ago. Listen, they go where the money is. Actually, no, I was going to say again, these were negotiated before, but these actually were both negotiated during his first administration in 2016.
Who knew he'd be back?
Who knew he'd be back?
Well, but the difference, I would argue, those are very good points you make, but I don't remember Xi or Putin or any of these people trashing the games when they were there. In fact, they were excited. Trump's MO is to trash those things that I know. And that would be an odd kind of...
Do you think he'll actually trash him?
I
think he'll get persuaded. I think he'll get into the whole pageantry of it. I don't know.
Well, what I wonder is it, he loves this sort of pageantry among patriotism, this militarism.
The flags.
The nation, we've made America great. Like, this is honestly an opportunity. What's interesting to me is that the Olympics are in a liberal enclave of Los Angeles, and many of the World Cup games are taking place. They're primarily taking place in North America, though there are a few in Canada and Mexico.
Some are taking place here, right, at
Gillette. Some are taking place at Gillette. The finals are in New York City. These are hostile environments. As Mayor Wu just pointed out, when they talk about the will of the people, well, the will of the people of Massachusetts was for Harris Waltz. The will of the people of the city of Boston was for the Democratic Party. So it's interesting to me, how does he talk about the cities? Not so much the games. How does he talk about the cities that have actively voted against him time after time after time? Also, keep in mind, the Paralympics take place following the Olympics. We've heard how he has talked about the disabled community and what he has said about, individuals or, have been wounded in war. You have to support all athletes. And the IOC, unlike the World Cup, FIFA, hasn't quite engendered themselves to Trump the same way FIFA has. FIFA sort of has a very comfortable, friendly, relationship. IOC, not as much. So it will be an interesting dynamic to keep an eye on.
Well, the one last thing I'll say about this, and you both may be right, you say he'll get caught up in the patriotism and the excitement in the world stage. When the first gold medal winner criticizes his deportation plans, do you think Donald Trump will be silent and say, well, it's only one person, I'll just do the right? I mean, that's not his style.
Fairness, let's see, what are we, 2020? Okay, so we'd be in an election year for 2028, right? Like, that would be the next time, so he still will be in office. I mean, Jim, let's be honest, I don't know what kind of threats will be in place upon free speech and the ability to be a dissident of the federal government.
You don't even know if
there'll
be an election in 2028.
You don't even know if there'll be an election.
So
more things to look forward to. Thank you, Trenni Casey.
Also, Rosie.
Great to see you.
We have been speaking with Trenni Casey. She's an anchor reporter at NBC News Boston. Up next, Corby Kummer, our food man, on the Trump administration food policy going forward, SNAP programs, etc. And also, question 5, the tip minimum wage. It did not win. We're going to get Corby Kummer's take on that. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, in leading museums these days, women artists are gaining more prominence. However, museums still lag in collecting and showing works by women, revealing just how much the gender gap remains. Founded in 1987, the National Museum of Women in the Arts is dedicated solely to the creativity and work of women. After an extensive renovation, we'll check in with the museum's director. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Moonbox Productions, presenting The Thanksgiving Play, serving up history and humor with a steaming side dish of hypocrisy. Opens November 21st at Arrow Street Arts in Cambridge. Tickets at arrowstreetarts.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're at the Boston Public Library and streaming youtube.com/GBH News. A reminder of our text prompt at 877-301-8970. A forgotten library book was returned to the Worcester Public Library after 51 years. We'll read your text thoughts on little items on your to-do list you just can't help but keep putting off, and how good it feels when you finally check the thing off that list. We're joined now, though, on Zoom by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer. Corby's the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program. That's at the Aspen Institute, a senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hello there, Corby.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Marjorie.
Hello, Corby Kummer. Great to talk to you. So let's start with the question 5, the Massachusetts ballot question about tipped wages. Servers were going to get up to from their wage of $6.75, I think it is, up to $15 an hour. It failed big time, with a lot of servers seeming to be opposed to it. So what are we to make of this?
Well, the Mass Restaurant Association and local restaurant owners are saying an out-of-state company came in and tried to sell us on this. What's this? It is eliminating the so-called tipped minimum wage of, I think, $6.75, that will allow restaurant owners to pay much less in wages and save money on the bet that servers will make more than minimum wage, which would have gone up to $15 an hour, in tips. This great increase in the very base wages that restaurant owners would have to pay, they said, would throw them out of business after so much chaos still in the wake of the pandemic. They haven't really gotten on their feet. Labor costs more, all costs are more, food prices are up. They did not want this, and the servers said they risked making less money in tips too if restaurant prices went up to compensate for the wages. So it was unpopular all around with the restaurant owning community. Where it's popular and where I think it's a good idea is for the servers who feel they don't want to compromise their own moral standards or be harassed because they're completely reliant on tips to make their salary and their base salary. It's an ongoing dispute between One Fair Wage, that out-of-state outfit, which has successfully lobbied to eliminate the tip minimum wage in, I think, 8 states, and restaurant owners who say we don't want our costs to go up.
Corby, in your description of the two sides, I don't know if I read something into this that wasn't there. You seem to be ridiculing the arguments of the restaurant owners. Were you, or did I
No, their costs are going way up, and anything that could cause them to have to not be able to make rent or payroll, you have to take seriously, especially because they're all saying we don't want this.
Can I tell you something? I've said this to Marjorie. I can't remember if I said it on the air. In the quarter of a century, Marjorie and I have been doing this show, obviously ballot questions every couple of years. I don't think I've ever gotten more calls on a question off the air than I did from what I would consider to be progressive. No, progressive.
You have been to every restaurant in Boston many times and are on good terms with all the people that are there.
No, it's not. But progressive restaurant owners, not with one exception, a high-profile exception, who opposed this question, and which led me. It still does. It resolves for now this issue about the tipped wage in Massachusetts, but it feels to me, and you're the expert, that it doesn't really resolve the deeper issue about tipping. Am I right? And if I am right, what is the deeper issue that still needs resolution?
It doesn't resolve it, and what I find very sobering is that the highest profile national restaurant owner to advocate this before the pandemic was Danny Meyer, and he was saying this is just fairer to everybody. In New York, there was a law against sharing tips with back-of-house workers who don't have FaceTime with diners. There were many class action lawsuits from servers saying you shouldn't have shared my tips with the cooks and the dishwashers. So it just seemed a basic question of justice. But when Danny Meyer started raising menu prices to make up for this, his servers drifted away.
He abolished tips at one point, didn't
And
he?
after a year or two, it was, I think, a good 2 years, his incoming CEO had to walk the whole thing back. And so it just folded, it failed. And if restaurant owners and servers don't want this, I don't know that it's going to be resolved.
Well, you know the thing about this is one of these kind of human nature things, I think, where if you have been a server and you've been a good server and you've done a really great job and you are working your butt off, there's something that disturbs you about sharing or pooling tips with people who are not doing a good job. It takes away some of your professional pride.
Wait. You're stating, as a matter of fact, the back of the house people are not doing a good job.
I'm talking about other people that are also servers, and I'm talking about the back of the house too. I think that's part of the problem.
Some of them are not, and some of the servers are not
right, but
great
I think,
either.
But I think what we heard from
most are.
We were getting deluged with texts here on the subject too, and a lot of servers did not like this either.
Well,
and I think it has to do with the fact that you can earn a living even now as a server if you're in a high-end restaurant and you view yourself as a professional. I think that's part of the problem.
You know, and also the one other thing is that is totally unresolved is virtually every restaurant I go to has some fee, a back of the house fee added on, an administrative fee. Because I assume the conclusion, this is a question, not a statement, Corby, that restaurateurs have concluded that rather than incorporating that 1 or 3% into the price, which will put off diners, that having it as a separate fee added on is less off-putting. Is that must be true, right?
It's not only that, it gave them the option of sharing the tips with everybody. And it took off the pressure of having the servers say, those are my tips, if they just put on this across the board service fee on top of it. But it's not popular with diners. And if restaurant owners raise the menu prices, the irony is, or the fact is, they lose business. And people will go where they buy they could get a $14 hamburger instead of a $17 hamburger across the street. Even if after that 14, they're still going to pay more for the tip. Diners want to feel they have control. Servers want to feel they've got control over their wages and what they earn for their efforts. And so what I'm most persuaded by is how high the costs have become and the margins are even thinner to run a restaurant. And if restaurant owners are coming together to say, this is going to imperil our profession and close more restaurants, I listen to that.
Last thing I'll say, the one good thing about this, regardless what side you're on, is overwhelming. So rather than it being 51-49 and this debate continuing the day after the election, at least this issue is backburnered. And I guess it's on the further equity issues.
The only one that did better was the effort to audit the legislature.
Exactly.
Apparently, the voters of Massachusetts can't wait to audit the legislature, even if they won't be able to get much information from it.
We're talking to Corby Comer.
Let's move on to another story about how during the pandemic, I don't think this is that surprising, Americans drank more, but apparently we're still drinking more, and we may be continuing to drink more as this next 4 years unrolls. I don't know, Corby Comer, but what do you think about this story?
So it's a very disturbing story, and as you read the statistics about more women drinking, about more young people drinking, what I kept going back to see was that the data ends at the end of 2022. It's a story about the pandemic, and of course people reported more heavier binge drinking. What this is saying is that people who were prone to heavier binge drinking were sent over the edge by the presumably isolation and anxiety of the pandemic, and there was much more severe illness and death. What the new study, again, it ends at the end of 2022, is saying is that more people, more young people, every group except Native Americans and Asian Americans, where a percentage of people reporting heavy drinking declined, reported higher levels of drinking than before the pandemic and even the beginning of the pandemic. The slow upward climb that had already been starting before the pandemic really increased from 2020 through 2022.
And what are we supposed to take away from this? I mean, as Marjorie said, not surprisingly, that's what she said when she introduced the topic. Obviously, when you're depressed and you're isolated, you do things to address that. Obviously, drinking is one of the things that a lot of us do. I mean, so what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to just be aware that that trend may continue and it could be a troubling trend? I mean, what are we supposed to make of this?
Fund alcohol awareness campaigns.
Okay.
What I really want to do is say, who's studying 22 to 24? What's the trend post 2022?
Yeah.
Because I'm an optimist and I want to think everything is always getting better. But this piece was saying the trend had already begun before the pandemic. It got a lot worse during the pandemic, and it hadn't ended by the end of 2022. But drinking is a problem. It continues to be a problem among young people and women, and we want to watch the data.
Can we talk about a good news story?
Yes.
I think. Well, good news flowing from bad news. The Surgeon General, I think, has really addressed it. And of course, he's going to be gone in a couple of weeks. So, no, he is. I mean, I don't mean to flip it, really gone, but at least he won't be the Surgeon General, likelihood. Surgeon General Murthy has talked about, the issues of social media and their connection to higher rates of mental distress, mental illness in kids, and that sort of thing. He's also talked a lot about loneliness as an epidemic in this country, which I think it is hugely important to highlight, and that's the bad news. The good news is he and others are doing something about it. There's this thing called Project Gather, which in addition to the Surgeon General includes in its ranks some of your buddies, high-profile people in the food industry. Tell us what it is and what you think about it.
Are you assuming I am not a big buddy of Vivek Murthy? I am a big buddy.
Are you really? Are you?
And yeah.
Oh.
I mean, you obviously don't read my LinkedIn with the wonderful selfie.
That is correct. I do not read your LinkedIn, but believe me, I will start doing it today. Okay.
So we've actually talked a fair amount about this idea.
Oh, great.
Which is that he'd had several pillars of how to combat loneliness in his really important, influential report about loneliness as an epidemic in this country that was released last year. And the last of his, I think, 6 pillars was coming together more over food. So he has written and released a recipe book. The recipe book is really a recipe for bringing people together over potlucks, along with some of his Indian family's heritage dishes. And the story that recently ran in the New York Times was about him. It happened to be a week when Alice Waters of the Edible Schoolyard was coming to Washington to try to promote the idea that schools should be buying from local farms, organic produce, local farms, cooking from scratch again in the kitchen, which, ironically enough, is something RFK Jr. is very much in favor of. He wants all schools to have kitchens again and to abolish all ultra-processed foods from school lunches. So who knew that this was going to be a strange bedfellows after the election? This event was just 2 weeks before the election in Washington. So Vivek Murthy, to test out his idea, brought a lovely dish of cardamom-scented rice to a potluck hosted by the wonderful host and author, Joe Nathan, the authority on Jewish cooking all around the world and in America, who was hosting Alice that week. Bunch of people came together. Guest star at the last minute, Jose Andres, who in his trademark jet vest that has 400 pockets, started bringing out all kinds of food, including his favorite botarga, which is smoked fish roe that he thinks is the most luxurious, best food and flavor enhancer there is. And it's something you can bring on camping trips because it lasts forever, lasts for months and months at room temperature. But it was a bunch of people, a farmer named Matthew Rayford too, all saying, here's what it looks like to bring a dish. And Joe Nathan, the host, is saying, here's what it's like to coordinate everybody who's bringing a dish. It's work to figure out, are we going to have enough? And is it going to be protein and carbohydrates and dessert? But what they all agreed after a wonderful and kind of raucous evening of working in the kitchen to heat everything up, tasting each other's dishes, trading cooking notes, was what matters is community. It's coming together over food. One of the beauties of the idea of Project Gather is you don't have to have a pre-made family that you bring. you're making your own family or you're discovering a new family that you can make. Being the Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, has gotten a bunch of meal services and cooking services, all private. So this is going to go on after the current administration. This is going to live on, including a great group called Brigade, which has hired chefs to help improve school lunches, especially in the Northeast. It started in London, Connecticut. They're going to do some of these gathered meals, project gather meals, and they'll create the template, which is already created, and they'll show how it works. And I think you should get all of your listeners roused to host a potluck themselves.
We're actually going to ask them how much they're into this concept in the last segment of the show. So I assume you're done bragging about your relationship with the Surgeon General. So
Never enough.
Let me just say, there is a local example of this on the same sort of level. We discussed Tracy Chang at Pagu has been hosting these community dinners, some of which end up having a few hundred people at them. You sit with people you don't know, which generally gives me hives, by the way. But I totally love these experiences. She usually has a few speakers. They might be chefs. They might be social activists. They might be whoever they are. And they're exactly what is being prescribed here. And they are a wonderful bringing together of people. So again, we'll talk to listeners about it at the end of the show, but I with some hesitation, agree that it's a wonderful idea. We're talking to Corby Kummer. I'm sorry, what, Corby?
There's no magic formula. If Tracy Chang has been doing it brilliantly at Pagu, I'm sure the Surgeon General would say, this is fantastic, support everybody who's doing it. It's just to get that idea in circulation.
I agree.
So, Corby, let's talk about some issues, government programs, SNAP benefits for people who are experiencing hard times. The benefits increased in October, but I'm not clear if they've increased enough or what people should be getting.
I don't think you should use the word increase when if you get $1,000, you now get $1,002.
Yeah.
A $2 increase? I mean, really?
But I said to Jim, I wasn't sure how much we're underfunding this, or what are we doing with SNAP?
So SNAP is going to increase, or it did increase on October 1 of this year. So there was a new maximum benefit amount that would add $220 to the monthly total per person. So last year's cost of living adjustments were really substantial because inflation was higher. So this is about inflation and the adjustments that should be made every year. There was a new change requiring more so-called able-bodied adults without dependents, ABODs. They really use the term ABOD, making people from 52 to 54 instead of over 54 show that they are trying to find work. But this excludes homeless people, veterans. It excludes youth ages 18 to 24. But in any case, so they're going up a bit. But we definitely want to talk about a Massachusetts program related to nutrition benefits.
But before we do, I want to clarify something, because people heard me say $2 a month increase, then you $220. The $220 you're talking about it's based on household size.
Right.
And the total amount is $220 is added for each additional person. But within the budget, if you have the same family size as you had prior to October 1st, the average increase in the monthly amount is $2 a month. I hope I didn't confuse people, but that's what the deal is. You want to talk about what's happening in, of all places, Massachusetts there, Corby?
Yeah, and you know, the way you have gotten so many text messages from restaurant owners, with one exception, we've had a number of listeners writing in very upset about the Healthy Incentives Program, which is run by the Massachusetts Department of Transitional Assistance. So what is this? This is akin to Bounty Bucks, which was started by Massachusetts' own Gus Schumacher to double the value of SNAP assistance when used for fresh produce. This was $40 to $80 a month for a family of 6 or larger at vendors who sold fresh food. And it was just additional money the state would give, and it's going to go down to $20 per month. That sounds like maybe it's not all that much, but Chris Kurth, for example, from Sienna Farms, fabulous local farm, was saying that often 3/4 of the retail sales at his farm stands would come from this HIP benefit, the Healthy Incentives Program. And he called it a lifeline that kept his farm afloat during crop losses because of flooding and drought. A story in a Massachusetts news outlet was quoting the Lowell Farmers Market as saying, "We rely on the Healthy Incentives Program. So do our farmers. We're going to have many fewer visitors if people don't have that 40 to 80 as opposed to $20 a month." So it's state funding that matters, and it's going to go down.
You know, and by the way, when the governor's here next, we will broach this with her, because this is relatively short money, $10 million budget cut for a really, I think, important program. The one thing I don't understand, I hope you can explain to us, Corby, and by the way, as we always say, SNAP benefits when we talk about it, or what we used to call food stamps. With this farm bill still being unresolved between the Democrats and the Republicans, my understanding is if it goes past a certain deadline, maybe January 1st, whatever, a lot of things go back to what the Farm Bill said. I thought this was a typo, like in the 1940s. So is this as much of a potential disaster for small farmers and people who depend upon food stamps, SNAP benefits, if the Democrats and Republicans can't come to an agreement on a bill that I think you've told us historically was always bipartisan in nature?
It was historically bipartisan because farmers in farm states needed the massive subsidies, which now take the form of paid-for crop insurance if the crop fails. It used to be direct subsidies for planting a bunch of crops. And urban residents needed the $80 billion in, I think, a $1.2 trillion bill, $1.5 trillion. 80 billion of it is nutritional assistance because they needed it for high urban population areas. So it was liberals and conservatives always came together because there were both very important expenditures they needed. But Republicans have been more and more angry at nutrition assistance. They really were upset when something that completely bipartisan bill long before the pandemic, during the Obama administration, required recalculating what the average monthly cost, household food costs were, the Thrifty Food Plan, which is the basis of all SNAP benefits. And it finally was enacted under Biden. It was this 5-year study of what the Thrifty Food Plan should be. Now Republicans are trying to freeze it and say it will only be inflation adjusted. We're not going to do any more adjustments based on actual food prices, only inflation according to that Thrifty Food Plan that we enacted in, I think, the end of 2023, October of 23, I think. Democrats don't like this. They view this as a backdoor to just cutting and cutting nutrition benefits, so they won't go for it. And the whole thing is a snafu. The snafu, if it still continues unresolved through the end of this year, means that in February, there's a 1-month grace period. SNAP benefits could go down radically. And again, these ancient 70-year-old calculations for farm subsidies, which apparently are completely out of date with modern farming and could cost the federal government billions of dollars, will go back into place because they're the boilerplate default, the 1938, 1949 farm bills. It's really crazy.
Corby, can you do me one favor? We're out of time. Can you ask the Surgeon General to start returning my calls when you see him next?
It's a deal.
I appreciate it.
I'll put it on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, you should go to one of the little potlucks. You can bring all your Tupperware containers.
I told you, I go to the thing at Pagu every couple of months.
I think you should go to the Surgeon General's. I think it's disgraceful you haven't been invited.
Corby, good to see you. Be well.
Thank you, Corby.
Thanks, Corby.
We've been speaking with Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society's Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Up next, our text prompt of the day. We'll read your thoughts on the little items on our to-do list that we just can't help keep putting off. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Some pediatricians worry the second Trump administration could mean a reduction of childhood vaccinations, accelerating the reemergence of childhood diseases. They've already been combating a rise in vaccine hesitancy.
It's probably 50% of our job now in pediatrics is explaining to parents the importance of vaccinating their children.
That story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And Babson College, where you can earn a part-time MBA for your full-time life at the school ranked #2 best college in the U.S. by the Wall Street Journal. Graduate courses offered online or in person with remote options. babson.edu/part-time.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library and we're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. So we've been asking all day to send us your texts on procrastination. We're inspired by the case of one library book checked out of the Worcester Public Library in 1973. It was just returned last week. I'm sure you read about it. 51 years late. So we asked you, what's your late library book? What's the thing you keep putting off looking for or doing or returning? Maybe a text from a friend that's been sitting in your inbox for days, weeks, or months. Maybe it's that pile of crap in the corner of the living room you've been meaning to organize. Marjorie, what's the thing you'd say you've been putting off?
My entire life, Jim, has been one long procrastination. I mean, it's, I didn't get my taxes done by April, so then I delayed to October, and then I couldn't find.
No, not just October. You told me on the deadline night at midnight you were talking to your tax preparer.
It was 11 o'clock.
Excuse
actually.
me, sorry. Okay.
Because I had to find someone that would do my taxes last minute.
You're welcome, by the way.
Yeah, that was kind of a disaster. Everything, my whole life, I've had this problem with procrastinating, and you know what? It gets you so upset. It gets you so upset, and you really. There are all these things that I should be doing that I haven't done for weeks and months, and they're too embarrassing to go into.
But it's not only the stress it causes you before you read some text, the satisfaction you have from completing a long delayed task, even if it's small, is huge. So there's a positive reinforcement. Well, we just don't get there.
There's a new book. I'm going to run out and get this by Kimberly King Parsons. It's called "Took Me 11 Minutes to Do That Thing I've Been Avoiding for 3 Months," a memoir. I could write this with my hand behind my back.
You're putting off reading the text, by the way.
Okay.
Okay.
Here are some of the texts.
Yeah. So.
I've been meaning to text you for years, but haven't for various reasons. Alas, today is not the day. I don't have time, but soon.
By the way, Jamie just wrote a note says, a new book she's going to run out and get? How about never? That's so ridiculous.
But it explains a lot of the reasons people do it. It's about mood management,
Jim.
That's
mood
why
management. That's
mood management. That's the key.
Mood management.
Here's another texter.
Yeah.
I've always meant to get tickets to come see you two at the Boston Public Library, but haven't got around to it. Maybe in 2025. Listen to this one. I had a broken toilet flusher thing for about 6 months and had to put my hand inside the tank to flush. Well, that's pretty bad. It's cold, full of water in there. I finally took the time to fix it. It took under 15 minutes. And here's another one. Listen to this one. I started a quilt as an engagement gift for my fiancé. Got it out, cut it, put it aside for later. After a year engaged and after 38 years of marriage...
That's a pretty good one,
I just gave up and donated the whole thing to somebody else, and he never got an engagement gift in the end.
You want to hear from read Dan from Dorchester over there.
I'm a route sales rep for a liquor company. I've always had Boston as part of my territory back before there were parking apps. I used to get so many parking tickets. I used to be horrible about paying them. One time I had a boot warning in Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville.
All together?
Yeah,
Boston,
that's right.
Cambridge, and Somerville.
On Monday, I went into an account and came out to a boot in Boston. Had to go pay off all my tickets. But Friday, that same week, I got booted again and had to pay off all his other tickets. It cost him more than his rent for the month, and he had to stay out of Somerville after that until he could pay his tickets again. I mean, have you been booted?
Who's the caller? This is a quiz for you. We had a few years ago who hadn't paid his Somerville parking tickets, and we asked him about it.
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
That's right.
That is correct.
Have you ever been booted?
I've not been booted.
You've not been booted.
I'm pretty responsible about that.
Yeah.
You know what I have done?
I've been booted.
I was thinking about this
several times.
That is really shocking. I joined Weight Watchers, I would say 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's $6 a month.
Yeah.
How many times have I accessed in the last 4 years the Weight Watchers recipe site, which is what no, truth. 4 years, $6 a month, $72 a year. How many times have I gone on the website?
I would say 0.
I would say 0. And all you have to do is go to the damn site and hit, I want to, whatever the verb is, disconnect, disenroll, unsubscribe. $72 a year for 4 years.
Well, in the story about, took me 11 minutes to do that thing I've been avoiding for 3 months, a memoir, that is the book I'm going to go out and get. People talk about, waiting a year to do things because, to cancel subscriptions. That's a big one. It takes them 2 seconds. They never do it. And this person talked about going out and replacing an outside bulb yesterday. Took about a minute to do that, but it's been burnt out for 2 years, the light bulb.
We don't have time for this, but I should ask you earlier, I'm not as bad as you are, but I'm not good.
I'm pretty bad.
What motivates that when we know that it'll take a second, it's a good thing, and you'll feel good when you've done it? Why do we procrastinate?
Well, as I told you, the story says it's about mood
What does that mean? What does that mean,
a way
movement?
of coping and not doing things that you find
What is mood
scary.
management?
I don't know, Jim. I have to get the book and read up on it and figure it all out. But you're supposed to split tasks into tiny chunks, rearrange your schedule to do these kinds of things. And supposedly, if you do it little bit by little bit, that makes you feel better.
How many people listening to the show do you think are shocked that you had your car booted? Do you think? I think there's one person in Fitchburg.
There's nothing worse than coming out,
seeing that old boot,
seeing that big old boot, and you are really stuck then. Okay.
What's coming up?
Up next, we are going to be talking to, what are we talking? Oh, I'm
John
on the wrong
King
page.
from CNN.
We're going to be talking to John King from CNN. That's another problem I have.
Yeah, I know
Being
that.
on the right page.
I know what
That's
it is.
a big challenge for me.
It's a huge challenge. I know.
You're listening to Boston
She went to
Public Radio.
Stanford.
I
She
did.
went to Smith.
It's amazing they let me in.
It's amazing to let you out.
Boston Public Radio.
GBH and estate planning strategist Jerry Doyle to learn how the election results could impact tax law and what that may mean for your estate plans. Thursday, November 14th at 2 at our Brighton studios. Register online at gbh.org/estate planning.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And We Clean Heat Pumps, offering professional cleaning and maintenance of ductless mini-split heat pumps in homes and businesses as we head into fall. More at WeCleanHeatPumps.com. And the Boston Philharmonic with conductor Benjamin Zander, performing Purcell's Shockney, Holst's The Planets, and Elgar's Cello Concerto with cellist Alexander Bailey at Symphony Hall November 17th. Tickets at bostonphil.org.
I'm reporter Marilyn Scherer, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. He spent a year traveling around the country interviewing voters in battleground states.
What group dinners can do for your...
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. President Biden is hosting the Israeli president at the White House today, where he reaffirmed his commitment to Israel amid its ongoing war with Hamas in Gaza.
Well, Mr. President, welcome back to the Oval Office in the White House. You've been a friend for a long time, a personal friend, and my commitment to Israel is ironclad, and we share a deep friendship. I want to thank you again for being here.
Biden is trying to speed up progress toward a ceasefire in Gaza before President-elect Donald Trump takes office in January. Israel has failed to meet a 30-day deadline implemented by the Biden administration to provide much-needed humanitarian aid to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. NPR's Scott Newman reports the White House had threatened to cut off weapon shipments to Israel if it didn't do more to address the imminent threat of famine in Gaza.
For the first time in more than a month, 2 truckloads of food and water have managed to reach northern Gaza, an area that has been under intense bombardment by Israel, including a suspension of arms shipments from the U.S. Israeli officials say they are working to expand humanitarian aid to Gaza. Scott Newman, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
A judge in New York City has decided to postpone a decision on whether President-elect Donald Trump has immunity from prosecution in his criminal hush money trial. That decision now could come next week. Attorneys for Trump say prosecutors presented evidence during the trial that stemmed from Trump's time in office. NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports they argue that should not have been allowed.
Lawyers for the Manhattan District Attorney over the weekend asked New York Judge Juan Merchan to delay his decision on immunity in order to review how the presidential election would impact Trump's landmark criminal trial. Trump in May was found guilty of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. Emil Bovey, one of Trump's lawyers, agreed with the delay. Bovey said the stay and even a dismissal are necessary to avoid unconstitutional impediments to Trump's ability to govern. The New York judge was expected today to make a decision on whether some evidence brought in during Trump's trial violated the U.S. Supreme Court's recent ruling that presidents cannot be prosecuted for official acts taken in office. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, New York.
On Wall Street, the Dow was down 342 points. This is NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Governor Maura Healey is asking everyone to help prevent additional wildfires and brush fires that have scorched hundreds of acres across Massachusetts this fall. The governor met with local fire chiefs and firefighters in Middleton this morning.
Now is not the time to burn leaves. Now is not the time to go outside and light a fire out back. And sit around one of our stoves. It's just not that time. And so my ask to the public is that you do everything that you can to minimize the risks.
State officials say all of the fires are caused by human behavior. The governor's also asking everybody to conserve water, saying it's needed to douse those massive fires. A critical drought alert has been issued for parts of the state with low water levels in lakes and ponds. The Lynn Woods Reservation remains closed as firefighters try to contain fires that are now burning underground, and fallen trees are blocking roads. Unions representing striking teachers in Beverly and Gloucester will go before a judge this afternoon after defying a court order to get back to class. Teachers in Marblehead also on strike, so thousands of North Shore students don't have class. Gloucester's Mayor Greg Verga says negotiators remain far apart on educators' salaries. This teacher, Alex Ojandra, says higher pay is key.
We are asking for basic respect. And yes, fair wages is going to come along with that. School safety is going to come along with that. But the bottom line is just basic respect for the profession.
Teachers plan to rally in Marblehead this afternoon. In sports, the Bruins skating against the Blues tonight. Sunny, breezy, relatively mild, highs in the 50s right now. It's 51 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We are going to be back here tomorrow, and one of our guests will be former Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice Margaret Marshall, who gave us gay marriage here in Massachusetts many years ago, plus national security expert Juliette Kayyem. Hello again, Jim.
And let me just say, there's nobody better than Chief Justice Marshall to talk about what's going to happen with the federal courts, the Supreme Court, whether Justice Sotomayor should consider stepping down. She is the perfect person to talk to. In any case, we're joined on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, behind the brilliant all over the map this election cycle. I'm told he is in Iowa. The election's over, right? Is that as far as I know? John, the election is over, correct?
The election is over, Tim and Marjorie. Happy Tuesday. But we thought we would come back out and talk to our voters to get some sense of what they make of it and what their expectations are. And because Trump won, we're going to start with a group of Trump voters we have out here in Iowa, but just to get a sense of what they think about the election and, more importantly, what they think looking forward, what they expect from the president, what they don't expect from the new president.
Well, you've done a lot of this already. I mean, you've been interviewing voters from all over the country, and you've written about it for CNN. So give us a sense from your reporting. What happened, and did you see this coming?
I had a pretty fair sense this was coming. From our earliest trip, we used to come back and say, who would you rather be today? And first, when it was Biden versus Trump, almost every trip we came back, we said Trump's doing better out there. And then at the end, when it was Harris, a little bit of momentum for Harris at the end, but you saw it play out. Trump improved his support in rural communities. Trump improved his support marginally in the suburbs. Trump drew, and the exit polls will be scrubbed for the next couple of years before we know exactly right. But he improved his standing a bit among Latinos and a bit among Black, mostly among working class people who were whacked in the head by the cost of living and wanted something different. And so, now we find out what happens. And you talk about the voters. Look, some people are very happy, including our Trump voters out here. They think he's going to fix the border, and they think the economy will get better. We'll come back in 6 months and see if that's the case, see how they feel then. A lot of the most liberal Democrats are frightened. They don't like President Trump, and they don't want mass deportations. They think he's going to take some of their rights away. And so, you guys know me. We've done this for a long time. My attitude is he won the election fair and square. The Republicans are going to have 53 seats in the Senate. They're probably going to hold on to the House. And we're going to be in a fascinating moment of let's see when he comes back. And he said a lot of things during the campaign about policy, and he said a lot of things about possible recriminations and retribution. And I think we just have to watch and see, A, take him at his word, but then B, watch it all play out.
One thing I just wondered from all your reporting, John, we've heard from you and from other people the economic concerns, the price of eggs, people couldn't afford food, they couldn't afford their rent, the big economic travails, especially if you are just getting into the working class and struggling in the working class. But I often wonder, for people that weren't in those dire straits, who had a little bit more money, did they know about the being found to have been adjudicated a sexual predator? Did they know about the felonies and the election stealing and all that? Did they know those things that have bothered me? Or did they not think they were true? Because that's what's been upsetting to some of us. Why, especially if you're a woman, you would vote for someone who's assaulted as many women as he has.
There's a mix of that. If you meet a very fervent Trump supporter, they probably agree with him that at least it's trumped up, excuse the word. At least they would say it's exaggerated or the people are after him. A lot of the suburban people I talked to voiced concerns about it. Some of them said they could never vote for him. Others said they didn't know the vice president and they didn't trust her. They thought she was to the left of President Biden. A lot of them voted for Trump in 2016 and then Biden for 2020. They didn't know her and didn't trust her, and they have this, they think that they can, like we survived the first 4 years is their view. Will be closed, my taxes will be cut, and I'll get through it. I know a lot of people don't like it when I say it that way, but that's what people tell you, that he won and they'll get through it. And some people do have serious character questions about the former president who's now the president-elect. And I think that will be one of the big questions, when we see him back in office, how he conducts himself. But that's part of the pain out there. But yes, Marjorie, a lot of those people, some of those people, I don't want to overgeneralize, but voted for him because they thought that they don't like Washington anyway. They don't trust Washington anyway. They're not going to love it when he's the president either. But they think they're going to get something from him, which is a better border and a better economy.
John King, one last question about what happened, and then we'll move, actually a few more questions about what happened. I saw an interesting tweet the night after the election that showed Democratic Senate candidates winning a lot of races, the Baldwins, the Rosens, the Slotkins, in states that Kamala Harris lost. And the point being made by the tweeter was that in light of the fact that those candidates didn't run, according to the tweeter, totally dissimilar races from Harris, that it wasn't just the economy, at least in those states, that her race and gender, these are all white people, by the way, of course they're women in the cases I mentioned to you, that race at least was in play. Retrospectively, how much was her race and gender in play, John King?
Look, I think that there are a lot of people who voted for Harris who I met on the trail who said they saw Ghost in 2016. They were meeting people who said, I just can't vote for a woman. I don't think she's strong enough on the world stage. I don't know her. No one, Jim, is going to pick up the phone and answer a poll and say I didn't vote for her because she's black. No one's going to say that. I'm sorry. So is there still racism in America? I mean, of course there is. But I do think, in part, again, that'll take years and focus group and research to sort out. But to the point you just made, Tammy Baldwin won her race. The ones that they lost, Montana, Tester, Trump won that state by double digits. Ohio, Trump won that state big. Looks like Pennsylvania will go to the Republican. That's one that was closer. But those Senate candidates who overcame, they all have good personal brands, and they all focused a lot more on cost of living, and they're just better well known. So part of it was without a doubt that people didn't feel they knew the vice president very well. No one ever knows their vice president well. J.D. Vance will have this problem for years. Trust me, even though he's Donald Trump's vice president. Maybe a little less so, but people didn't know her very well, and so they didn't know if they could trust her. Had you had a Democratic primary, had she been out earlier, had she won a primary or somebody won, it might have been different. And she might have had a chance like Obama did. If there were people out there who had questions about voting for a black office holder, more time on the trail might have helped her answer it with enough people. But yes, there's racism in America. I don't think you can ever quantify to what degree it hurt her.
We're talking to John King. He is in Iowa, continuing his wonderful work at CNN. John, I have to say the most memorable moment of all your coverage on election night, and I wish we had the sound, we played it the other day. I'm going to paraphrase it. It was when Jake Tapper comes over to you and the Magic Wall and asks you to put up any areas where Harris was at that moment outperforming, John is smiling if you're not watching on the streaming, outperforming Joe Biden, and you pushed the button on the Magic Wall and the thing came up and your answer was something like nowhere. And Tapper said something like nowhere, and your response was yes, nowhere. And then you tie to that, the numbers I read, was it the New York Times this morning? 1.9 million fewer voters for the Democratic ticket in major cities, 1.2 million more voters for the Republican candidate in those same cities like Detroit and Philadelphia. I understand the Trump vote. I don't understand the large decline in the Harris vote. Can you explain that?
People are disenchanted and disaffected. Jim, on one of my earliest trips was to Milwaukee. We talked about this at the time. I was going door to door in the black community, and you had 75-year-old black women who lived the civil rights movement, watched people be beaten, watched people be jailed, watched people be killed for their right to vote, and said, I don't know that it matters anymore. I don't know that Washington cares about me. Look around my neighborhood, it feels forgotten. Democrats have a lot of soul searching to do to try to put the pieces back together here. One of the top of that list is going to be, again, this is largely working class. Yes, it's black voters in the inner cities, but they're working class people. They almost take their color out of it. Latinos in Nevada and Arizona and other places where that population. People who work with their hands, who work for a living, who haven't been able to buy a new car or take their family on a vacation the last couple of years. The hit from COVID, then followed by the cost of living. Democrats have to find a way to reconnect with these people. And a lot of those people, yes, they're not Donald Trump fans, so they may not have come out to vote. But Kamala Harris needed those votes, and she didn't get them.
And here again, we talked to you about this before, but again, when you look at the things that Biden has done, and I know everybody thought he was too old and he should have announced he wasn't going to run sooner, probably shouldn't have run it the second time at all. But when you look at what he has done for working class people, it is way ahead of what Donald Trump did in the first time around, or, he got lucky in terms of the economy then, or that he talks about now. So
one guy's an extraordinary promoter and one is a horrible messenger.
So I take it that people don't know about that. The drug prices, the $2,000 cap on Medicare, the CHIPS bill that brings a lot of these, or the green jobs that pay good wages that have come into a lot of parts of the country, because that is helping.
Yes, look, there's a lot, whether you agree or disagree with President Biden, whether you support those programs a lot, there are billions of dollars. Their prescription drug stuff saves people money up front. The infrastructure program, some of the manufacturing investments, some of those won't play out for the next 10 years. But they're starting to play out. I would say this, Jim and Marjorie, the invisibility of the president cost the Democrats dearly in this election in the sense that he was not out there talking about his accomplishments. He was not out there saying, I know inflation sucks, excuse my language, but look around the world. The United States is doing better than the other Western industrialized countries, and I'm trying to help. I'm doing what I can. His invisibility the first couple of years, so Trump had the stage to himself. He announced early he was running. Whether you like it or not, the mega media ecosphere is pretty loud. And the one thing, this connects back to the turnout question. I told you a couple times, I didn't see many Trump people going door to door when I was on the road. I saw a lot of Democrats going door to door. The Republicans have figured out how to use the algorithm to organize, how to get in touch with people where they are, where they communicate, where they meet. And you didn't see them on the streets because they were doing this business, on the phone and on the computer, and it worked. And so that's another lesson the Democrats have to learn.
And by the way, the New York Times says $175 million of Elon Musk money to a PAC didn't hurt in that get out the vote effort. John, beyond the economy, the one thing that Donald Trump was very direct about was what he appears to be honoring in terms of a campaign commitment, this mass deportation with Stephen Miller, who is unlike anybody else I've ever seen in positions of power. He's now the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and a fervent anti-immigrant person. This guy Homan, whose incredible quote on 60 Minutes when asked by the reporter, well, aren't you going to be separating families if you're doing this mass deportation? And he said essentially, well, they can just take the kid with them. In many cases, by the way, the kid is an American citizen under our laws. I know this is speculative, and I know that it was clear what he was going to do, and I know that he won a majority of the votes. If they carry through as early as January 20th on this commitment, do you think most of the people who supported Trump know what they were buying on that front, or is that what they want in your estimation?
I think that's a fascinating question. A lot of people just want a secure border. Right. They want to control the immigration process, and they would like the criminals and anybody to be evicted. I do think this is where the promises in the campaign trail, when they hit the road. I just drove through Cedar Rapids, Iowa. There are meatpacking plants and rendering plants there that have undocumented workers.
Sure.
Welcome to America. There are a lot of farms out there. We're about to go deeper into Iowa. We have undocumented workers. So a lot of the hospitality industry, which Donald Trump is familiar with, have a lot of undocumented workers. So it will be push come to shove when they start to do that. I think the question is how much do they mean? Homan means it. Stephen Miller means it. Does the Congress get in the way? Do they try to do it in a first step? We're going to do this and then move on to the next step. That's going to be one of the fascinating questions of the new year, without a doubt.
Talking to John King.
So, John King, they're going to be meeting in the Oval Office between President-elect Trump and President Biden. What do you think is going to happen there?
Number one, we have some normalcy. Look, I'm not here to defend either one of them, but I think it's good for America that the President of the United States and the President-elect of the United States will have the traditional lunch, and they will meet. And again, a lot of people listening, I don't like President-elect Trump. He has said nice things about both the Vice President and President Biden for calling him after the election. He's not contesting the results, and hopefully that thing gets put away permanently. That we do know how to count votes in the United States of America, and hopefully that one gets put away. And I think we see how it goes. Look, there's no love lost between these two men. That's Joe Biden, establishment Democrat, institutional guy who's been in Washington for his entire adult life, saying this is the way it's supposed to work, and I'm going to do my part. And I think all Americans should say thank you for that. And then we see how it plays out.
And do we know why the soon-to-be First Lady again is, as of the moment, skipping the meeting tomorrow with Jill Biden?
I do not know the answer to that. Whether that's a Biden thing, I don't know the answer to that question.
So, John, a couple of more things. We're losing you a little bit, so I'll try to get this in here. We know that Judge Merchan, in the case with the roughly 3 dozen felony convictions, is reserving his decision on what to do with the proceeding now that the convicted defendant, has been elected to the presidency. But there's a corollary question that was pretty hot on the internet, at least, right after the election results came out early Wednesday morning, died down a bit until, I can't remember who asked the question. Oh, I think it was on Meet the Press. They asked Bernie Sanders if he thought, oh no, that was about Sotomayor. It was about Sotomayor. I wanted to ask you about the pardon issue. What kind of pressure, if any, is there on Joe Biden to pardon Donald Trump, a preemptive pardon a la Ford and Nixon?
Don't really know the answer to that question. I mean, there's a big conversation in Washington about there's a separate conversation about do you press Judge Sotomayor to step aside. I guess I'm probably, I'll disappoint you with my answer. When an election happens, I wipe the slate clean and I start watching again. But there's, Biden's got, 70 days left, 69 days, something like that left. And he says he's going to make every day matter. We'll watch.
You know what's funny, John, and talking about misinformation? I must get one of these texts 5 or 6 times a day, the same thing. It's nothing. Kamala Harris didn't lose because she's black. Nothing to do with that. It's because she doesn't have the ability to speak without a teleprompter, and she wouldn't do a long form interview. I just wonder. Didn't these people see the debate? I think there was a teleprompter in the debate. Didn't they see her do these other interviews? You may have said, a lot of people say that View interview, and she said, how would she differentiate herself from Biden? And she said, really, nothing comes to mind except putting a Republican.
She didn't do 3 hours with Joe Rogan.
She didn't do 3 hours with Joe Rogan, which everybody thinks she probably should have done now. What happened is she wanted to do 1 hour, and she wanted him to come to her instead of her to go to him. And people may remember that Joe Rogan did Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Elon Musk. And he's hugely popular. 46 million people saw his interview with Trump. But it's a very easy, they're not, I don't think there's much fact-checking going on there in the Joe Rogan interviews, but they're very cordial, and he's a charming guy. And Trump is talking about the Oval Office and the Lincoln bedroom and how wonderful it is to go to the White House. It's their softball interviews, is what I'm saying. But nonetheless, how do people think that she can't talk without a teleprompter or do a long-form interview when she's done both over and over and over and over? It's just crazy.
Well, part of that is the Fox News, and I shouldn't just put it on Fox News, the whole mega media ecosystem. That's what they say about her, number one, that she's always on teleprompter. But I will say this. Look, she had to, in 110 days, run a presidential campaign that normal candidates have 2 or 3 years to run. So you have to give her some grace. At the same time, and she did, she made it close, and it's more competitive. Trump won all the battleground states, so from an electoral college perspective, it's a blowout. If you look at Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they sort of moved back to their normal margins. She had a path, she just didn't execute, and that turnout question comes back. But I will also say this. She's from California. She doesn't run in competitive elections, and you saw occasions where her lack of experience hurt her. When she went on The View and said, they asked her, what would you do different from Joe Biden? And she said, nothing comes to mind. Yeah. That was in a Trump ad. That was in a Trump ad within 48 hours. Yeah. She is uneven in those settings. She does make tactical, strategic mistakes in those settings. And I would attribute that to, if you think about, Barack Obama lost a race, right? He lost his first race for the House. Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, got beat in his first re-election try. Politicians who've lost tell you it teaches them to go to school and to learn things. Then when you get humbled, and again, this is, that's not a criticism of her because it's just her life. She's from California where you don't have a competitive Republican Party right now. But I think her lack of that kind of experience did show on occasion.
I agree with that.
And plus, yes, what they say about her, always on a prompter, unable to do these things. Some of that's just the propaganda machine on the other side. But she did make a couple of unforced errors in this campaign that hurt her.
Well, she never answered very well on the economy, I don't think either. She was always kind of, that was a little bit too vague for people, I think. But one last thing from me. Bernie Sanders, Seth Moulton, our congressman here from Massachusetts, they're both talking about identity politics. The Democrats were too focused on identity politics. Did you hear a lot of that in your reporting as well?
Yeah, a lot of people don't like it that way. They want things done. They don't want it to be about this group or that group. At the same time, I think, look, the Biden administration ignoring the problem at the border for its first couple of years. I know the numbers are better now. I know they have taken actions, and Donald Trump's actually going to inherit a pretty tough border policy from the Biden administration. But they waited a very, 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 very long time to do anything about it. You saw the power of the transgender issue in the Trump ads. And I think some of those ads were kind of mean-spirited. But Democrats need a better way to talk to people about those issues. People are uncomfortable about those issues, and they think the Democrats are preaching at them. A lot of people think that, as opposed to let's have a conversation. And, yes, some of those conversations are going to be hard about athletics and about locker rooms and about shared spaces and things like that, but have them at the community level. I do think, look, if you're in a safe House district, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you can do whatever you want, but you have to remember your critics are taking what you say and making it about the national party. And that's what I think, the Trump campaign did very, very well in linking the vice president, probably unfairly, to some of the more liberal members in Congress. And she left it unanswered. She didn't fight back. And so Democrats have a very, very long list of things. I would put at the top of that list learning how to talk to people who work with their hands and live in rural and small town America. Because I've said this to you guys 100 times. My first campaign was 1988. And the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Michael Dukakis, only won 10 states, but he won the state I'm in, Iowa, and he won West Virginia, because in those days, farmers and coal miners voted for Democrat. They don't anymore.
Hey, John, last thing from me. Oh, well, two things. One, an anonymous texter says, John, please put on your seatbelt. That's number one. I think it's because she loves you or he loves you and wants to make sure you're safe. Last question. How do you think the media performed in this cycle? I mean, the legacy, fact-based media. And you know what I hadn't thought about? A corollary question. You can answer both until I read this morning. I should have realized this. Trump essentially, other than Vance, did interviews, including on your station. Trump virtually avoided mainstream legacy media for the last month plus this campaign. There's got to be, sadly, a moral to that story. What's your assessment of how you, I don't mean you personally, but your industry, the responsible part of the industry that believes in facts, how did they perform?
Well, number one, you're right about Trump. He stayed in his safe spaces, and it worked. And so it's hard to criticize it, right? I think as a guy who's been doing this for 100 years, I think they should do the Sunday shows and they should do interviews. They should talk to all of us. They should also do the do the broadcast. The business is changing. Do everything you want, but don't forget us. But look, that genie's out of the bottle. So I can complain all I want. How did the business do? I'm proud of what we did. I love being out on the road, and I think that for the part, I was on the road a lot, so I can't say I watched a lot of television news when I was on the road. The polls said it was a very close competitive race. People covered it as much. I think we always spent too much time on the horse race and less on policy. To Marjorie's point, do voters really know? Do some people who voted for Donald Trump fully understand what he proposed at his rallies and the like? I think that's a fair question. So, like anything, I said the Democratic Party has a lot of studying to do. We should always, be introspective and scrub how we did. And I would argue that spending more time on policy and less time on polling is usually the right way to go.
Well, if they want some advice about how to listen to real people, they should maybe watch some of your interviews during the campaign.
Yeah, they were great, John.
In the battleground states.
Yep.
John, we really appreciate you squeezing us in today. And as always, you were terrific in election season. Thanks for your time.
I'll see you next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank
yes,
you, John.
John King.
We've been speaking with CNN Chief National Correspondent John King. I love talking to him. Behind the all over the map, this election cycle, where he did go out and speak to dozens and dozens and dozens of voters all over the country, to those places where people do feel that they are often ignored. He didn't ignore anybody. Up next, we're going to open the lines to ask you about a seemingly simple way to cure the loneliness pandemic, which I guess is encompassing a lot of us. And one way is just breaking bread together. No more sad sandwiches over the kitchen sink, people. Jim is going to tell you the solution. Up next, you're listening to Boston Public, yes you are, listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, parents and educators weigh in on the ongoing teacher strike. The Massachusetts National Guardsman accused of posting military secrets online is due to be sentenced in federal court. And President-elect Trump says vaccine skeptic RFK Jr. can go wild on health. Some pediatricians worry about a reduction in childhood vaccinations, accelerating the reemergence of childhood diseases. That's starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Museum of Science, where their Fun for All Ages seasonal exhibit, All Aboard, Trains at Science Park, returns November 20th, featuring more trains, activities, and magic. More at MOS.org. And MIT Federal Credit Union, with memberships open to the general public, offering share certificates and certificates for retirement to help members reach their savings goals. Membership info at mitfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Margaret Marshall, former Chief Justice of the SJC, the state's highest court, who no one has a better perspective on the nation's courts than her. She'll join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the library, and hope you join us too. We talked about this a little earlier with Corby Kummer. Loneliness is a public health epidemic in this, well, not just this country, around the world. That's according to current Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. And one solution he's proposing to solve it, it's called Project Gather. Eat meals regularly with other people, sometimes complete strangers. So we're opening the lines to ask you what you think about Murthy's idea at 877-301-8970. I think a lot of you know, while this concept of a communal table at a restaurant gives me hives, should I and people who feel like I do get over it in a valiant effort to combat loneliness and, much more important, separation and division? Could a potluck dinner, as his was, save us all from the loneliness epidemic? I shouldn't keep saying the loneliness. That's where that's coming from. But this seemingly intractable political division we're seeing as well. If you're sitting at a table eating with somebody with whom you disagree, is it possible you can get over that divide? Would you do it? The number is 877-301-8970. In the abstract, it seems fabulous. And I have to say, even though I've said on the air many times, those restaurants where when you go into the restaurant, you got to sit next to somebody you don't know, really puts me over the edge. I know you're going to be shocked when I say, I think I could do this. I really think I could do this. And it is true, when you're eating with somebody, I think the ability to engage in almost armed verbal conflict is reduced. So not only does it deal with the loneliness thing, which is a real serious problem coming out of the pandemic and all that sort of thing, but it may be a way to at least chip away at the, she doesn't, at the, well, you're being, you're the cynical one and I'm not?
I'm just laughing because you say you really, you don't think you could do this and this is too upsetting and it gives you hives to sit next to people. It does. Every time I've gone somewhere with you where you say I don't want to go in alone, I'm too nervous.
I do, and I wait for you.
And then I go in, we walk in and I don't see you for 3 hours because you're off, holding court.
That's really not true. I'm not holding court.
You're holding court, yes you are. Or it's some dinner thing or something when we go to these donor dinners, Can
I explain something to you?
Who is holding court and telling all the stories? It would be Jim Brown.
Well, let me explain myself, and then we'll get to the calls at 877-301-8970. It is different to roam around and hold court.
Okay.
When you're having a meal, I hate to get anal about this.
Social butterfly.
When you're eating a meal with someone, you're a potted plant in your particular thing. And if somebody to your left or somebody at your right I went to the people that own a Celeste, which wins all these awards.
Or Pagu, where you go for those
They own a restaurant in Vermont.
That's right.
And I went to that restaurant in Vermont.
Very snazzy.
I never told you this story.
Yes, you did.
It's on a mountaintop.
It's on a mountaintop.
They own this thing. It is unbelievable.
It's swish.
It's called it's not swish. It's fabulous.
It's posh.
It's called Esmeralda. I was sitting at a table, a communal table, which I decided I was going to do in the spirit of the moment, next to a guy who... Imagine the person in your whole life who hated you the most and multiply it by 1,000. And I was sitting next to that guy.
Did he listen to the radio show?
I guess he does. I guess whatever he was, he couldn't look at me. He did not respond to a word. I tried to make small talk. Didn't look at me saying it's really uncomfortable. Having said that, because of the moment and because I think it is important that we at least listen to other people and have conversations, I would give this a try. And I think over food, I hate the expression break bread, by the way.
Break bread.
I can't stand that.
Okay.
Over food, I think it has a chance. The number is 877-301-8970. And don't be ashamed if you couldn't do this, which I historically have not been able to do. Admit it and we'll have a conversation with you. Well, you haven't answered. Would you do it?
Oh, I'm all in favor of potlucks. I love having people.
It's not just a potluck, Marjorie.
Potlucks because I don't really cook, and the stress. I can clean the house, but I can't really cook.
How about with people you don't know?
Potluck would be great. Okay, that's fine.
It's fine. Okay, excuse me. How many of you would like to come to Marjorie's house for dinner tonight? Practically the whole audience. I'll give you the address at 2 o'clock.
I really
show up whenever you want.
Great tuna fish. Let me tell you,
do make the best tuna fish.
Nobody who makes tuna like I do out of the can. The key is to dry it.
I'm serious. By the way, what if I handpicked 10 people from the audience right now and said, here's Marjorie's house. She'd like to have you over for dinner tonight. Could you do that?
Not tonight. I'm going to be at the JFK Library tonight discussing the election results with Heather Cox Richardson and Eileen McNamara, Pulitzer Prize winner. And by the way, if you can't come, you can watch it on YouTube for free. I think they're doing it live on YouTube.
Well, unfortunately, most of them won't be able to watch because they're going to be up there in Beverly watching me do a thing on the impact of media on the anxious generation.
Okay.
877-301-8970. We're making light of this. I think this Murthy idea and a whole bunch of progressive restaurateurs is a brilliant idea, and we should all try it. John from North Andover, which side are you on? Hello.
Hi, I'm definitely on the side of, cooking together as a family. And then also, I think I was listening to, the speaker you had on, and I think he said a really important thing is connecting with your local farmers. I'm a big purchaser of, local meats and local grown produce. And I've built so many great relationships with local farmers, with chicken, vegetables, fruit. And it's super important, where your food comes from. And then my family is, old school traditional Italian. So we love cooking together all the time. When I was younger, I would be over with all my Italian relatives who were all first generation from Sicily. And, we would all cook together, have big conversations at the dinner table. And, a lot of people don't do that anymore. They don't really cook with their family. They don't sit down, have good conversations. And I think that's, so important today.
So, John, it's great. The family thing is beautiful, you described. How about the next dinner, you invite 6 people with whom you have political disagreement to see if that can smooth over things? Could you do that?
I think for sure. I've done that with my friends as well, too, just, ordering Domino's and trying to talk about it. It's definitely difficult, but it's hard. I have some Trump supporter friends, and they're very stubborn on certain things.
Well,
John,
some people on the Harris
call.
side are too.
Now,
John, thanks for the call.
Some texters have some questions here.
What is it?
Why does Jim Browdy hate eating with strangers but loves stealing strangers' fries and other food?
First of all,
off
it's
their
not
plate?
Stealing. That's the answer. It's not stealing at all.
Okay. And here's
By the way, when you have 100 fries on your plate and someone takes one fry, that sure as hell is not stealing anything.
And here's one of these words that we'll be using a million times between now and Christmas. Will there be fixins at the table?
Well, someone wrote this. Was this you, Jamie? The only expression I hate more than breaking bread, that gives me hives, is digging into the fixins.
No, I love fixins.
The fixins
The more
thing
fixins,
is really,
the better.
It does. Look who's on the phone, by the way.
Cream, mushrooms. Oh, my God. Liliana from Fall River, my hometown. Liliana,
They voted for Trump, by the way.
I was brokenhearted. My Fall River went for, Republican for the first time, ever.
Hi, Liliana.
Do you have an explanation, Liliana?
How are you?
Do not mention that name, please.
Okay. It's fine with us.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We'll move on.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Please.
I was
yes.
stunned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thursday, I'm hosting a pasta, what do you call it?
Potluck.
Potluck. Potluck. Okay, for my Sons of Italy club.
Wow.
Oh, great.
So I asked the member to bring some food that reminds them of their grandmother or their favorite recipe. Okay. The first sign up that I had was zucchini bread.
Zucchini bread.
I love zucchini.
Yeah.
But come on. Zucchini bread is something American. It's not
it's
Italian.
American.
Sorry,
okay.
I apologize.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I reorganized my list.
Yeah.
We are going to have homemade pasta lasagna with ragu sauce. Bolognese sauce.
Excellent.
We are having chicken cacciatore. We are having pork loin stuffed with the fennel and other spices. And let me see, meatballs.
Meatballs, sure.
Italian sausage and pepper.
Why not? Yeah. Liliana, let me ask you a question. If one of the members of the Sons of Italy who came to your dinner happened to have voted for the person whose name you don't want to hear, would that be okay with you?
No, I probably poisoned him.
That's
okay,
right.
It's an honest woman. That's why we love this woman.
Who shall not be named, as well as the person that wanted to bring zucchini bread. They're off the list.
Hey, Liliana, we've said this before. If we ever came down to Fall River, could we all have dinner together?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We'd love it.
Okay.
We're gonna be in touch soon. What's that? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You know why
Sure.
I dislike that man so much?
Why?
Because he has divided my family.
Yeah.
And we do not have dinner together as often as before because we cannot speak to each other.
It's horrible.
And I hate him to the... I wish he will go to hell in the last ring of the Divine Comedy, okay? I want him in the last ring.
We got it. I think we have to end it there, Liliana.
She's not a fan.
Liliana, we are huge fans of yours. Call us again soon, and we are going to come down and take you to dinner sometime soon. How did that dinner sound, by the way?
It sounded fantastic, and I'm sure she's an unbelievable cook as well. Jim,
but not zucchini
I want
bread,
to just
by the way.
report that an anonymous texter said that they called Endicott College.
You don't have to read this.
To get the details on your event tonight at 6 p.m., and they had no idea what I was talking about. Couldn't find anything listed.
Okay, since you brought it up.
I'm going to be at the JFK Library in Dorchester
By the way,
at 7.
The reason why Endicott is a space rented out at Endicott by a number of organizations, including the Lutz Foundation, connected to Beverly Hospital. We're talking about Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation,
Jim.
Social media's impact on mental health of adolescents.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm not done yet. If you go to my Twitter page,
your Twitter page,
which is at Jim Braude, Braude, it's free, but you can click on the link. It will tell you where to go. And that, what do you mean,
Well,
and
the
you can
texter
register.
asked about your Twitter page, but they had never heard of you or didn't know how to spell your name.
No, they didn't say that. And by the way, we are serving zucchini bread to everybody who comes tonight. Did you know that zucchini bread was you're Italian. Did you think it, hello. Did you think zucchini bread was an Italian thing? Liliana said it's BS. It is? Oh, that's too bad. Okay, Jamie is not only is he Italian, he's got a big Italy connection.
Texters are texting in to ask how we watched tonight at my JFK Library performance. I don't know actually, but I know it's going to be on YouTube and it's going to be streamed live or something. So go to the JFK Library website and look for
Let
JFK
me just tell you
Library.
something, if I may. The likelihood of Marjorie showing up at the right place at the right time for this event tonight
I will
is
be there,
modest.
Jim.
Let's say that.
I'll be there with my shoes on.
By the way, I want you to know.
Can you tell me the event with Marjorie and Heather Cox Richardson tonight? Somebody's texting about that too, Jim. We're waiting for one.
Listen to this.
Endicott
An anonymous texter says, "How is Jim getting to Beverly, Mass from the BPL? That's far." The texter says. Let's go to enough of this. Let's go to Sue in Winchester. You're really incorrigible. I mean, you are.
I'm incorrigible.
Why did you read the text from the person who said,
Because
I called Endicott College, they didn't know anything about the event? It's a huge event. Hundreds of people have pre-registered.
Hundreds of people.
Hundreds, yes.
We'll see. Sue from Winchester.
Hi. First time calling in.
Whoa, thank you.
And I listen all the time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
I wanted to, and we love you. Yeah,
Thank
we love both of you.
Thank you.
So anyway, I'm in Jim's camp. I find it cringeworthy that sitting at a table with strangers. I'm an introvert, and it makes me nervous. Anyway, I don't like it. But my husband is a total social butterfly. It's like the air he breathes. He comes alive when he sees people. He needs them. Like he has to be talking to somebody at all times. So I tell him all the time that I watch him, and it's like watching a master class. And what I've seen the benefits of him talking to people, and now I'm working at it myself because he really does make a lot of friends, meets nice people, learns some things, has a good conversation, and it's lovely.
And are you picking up any of his tricks? Are you moving in his direction or no, Sue?
I am absolutely working at it, yeah.
And why I'm uncomfortable in those settings too, and I mean that sincerely. Marjorie's going to make fun of me, but I am. Do not read this text, Marjorie, in the middle of this call, please. So, what makes you uncomfortable, and what makes you uncomfortable in those settings?
Well, I think I'm shy, and I don't like talking to strangers. I'm not good at small talk. I rather have a few close friends that we can talk about anything, but. Being at a party or at a function, but I've been working at it and coming up with a few things to talk to people, and it's working. Can
I give you a little advice because I'm doing better too. If you don't like small talk, Marjorie, see if you agree. I'm going to give Sue advice.
Okay, all right.
When you go to a party and you start a conversation with someone, bring up something that you both can, light, like, I don't know, mass deportation, for example, as something that just... Sue, you're an honest woman, and say hi to your husband for us, too. Yeah. Thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
I would like to point out, Jim, that a texter who's way ahead of me has just given me the site. What you do is you go to jfklibrary.org/events and awards, forums, and interpreting the 2024 elections. I'm sure if you just go to the JFK library.org, interpreting the 2024 elections. Up will pop all the instructions about
Well, it's a lot
what
easier,
you
by
do.
the way. If you just go to my Twitter page and click on the link. By the way, Jill, listen to this email.
Did you see this text?
How offensive is this?
Event going to be available free on YouTube like Marjorie's. Sorry, dear Jim, I'm leaning toward dear Marjorie.
I mean, what is wrong with that woman?
I love it.
877-301-8970. Let's go to Guy in New Hampshire.
Hi, Guy.
Guy, what's your deal?
Well, listening to first-time caller.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've listened to you guys for ever.
Oh,
I
thank
love
you
it.
very much.
Thank you for that, too.
As far as the interactions, many years ago, I was leaving my restaurant at 1 a.m, had heard something about dining in the dark. It was about a prince or king. It was someone that was going blind in Switzerland. So what he wanted to do was to create something that his friends and patrons could come in and experience what he was going through as far as going blind. So what I've done, or what we had done, my wife and I, it was called Dining in the Dark. And the social aspect of pairing people or teams with people that don't know each other. When you went to a particular table, and there could be at least 70, the menu was they didn't know, but once they had sat and there was this interaction that was second to none. You never would have known that these people were going to sit next to each other, engage, and then once everything had concluded, 2.5 hours,
wow.
they became friends.
That is actually a beautiful story.
But it was something, Jim, that they didn't know whoever was sitting at the table. And then the conversation led to their families and their kids.
That's great.
And their grandparents.
Guy, that is a beautiful story and an excellent first call.
Thank
2 in
you,
a
Guy.
row. That was great, Guy. Call us again, please.
Remember that movie? It's old now, about 15 years old, but The Big Night. Remember The Big Night? It was all about an Italian restaurant. Jamie can't talk because he's reading the text.
No, he's probably writing the text, actually, knowing Jamie.
Joshua Rhode Island wants to know if he could use his ticket for the BPL show for just performance tonight, or is it just a 2-drink minimum?
That's funny. That's really funny.
And then another
See me
texter
laughing?
says, get over your angst here, Jim, or your jealousy, whatever it is. Just put on your best dicky.
You know, you are like a 4-year-old. You really are like a 4-year-old person.
And then we have to...
Oh, keep reading these, Marjorie. No, I'm not going to help you. Go ahead, read them, Marjorie.
Will we find out tomorrow which event has more people? Never seen crowds like this.
Exactly.
Jim will say, just like the former president. And by the way, to be serious for a moment, somebody just sent a lovely text here. This is TR from Waltham, who says, Thanksgiving is tough for us single folk. Could one restaurant serve turkey dinner just to us singles? It would be swamped with reservations. And that's a great one. I think a lot of people, either because their family's not close or their friends aren't close, they're by themselves on Thanksgiving. That would be a lovely thing.
Well, by the way, we started this saying that the impetus for this on the part of the outgoing Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, this Project Gather, was not about overcoming political differences, but overcoming what's an epidemic in much of the world, which is loneliness.
Yeah.
And I think this is a twofer. I'd say it would clearly attack the loneliness crisis in this country, and it might attack, there's no harm, I mean, not people who are extremists, but short of extremism, if you're willing to listen, maybe we do a little better next round.
Well, you know, I think what you have to remember is we were always able to have dinner with our families on the other side of the political spectrum. There might be hot button issues, gay rights, say, like 20 years ago.
Did you
and
hear
that was
Liliana?
hot. Yes, but this is something unique to Trump.
It is.
This didn't happen when, John Kerry lost to George W. Bush. You liked Bush, you liked Kerry, but your life went on. You didn't think about the president for days or weeks. I said this a million times.
That's true.
This is Trump. That's what this is about. I think that's why so many people are upset, because this is going to be another 4 years. I remember the day when we found out that Biden won. I think it was Saturday last time around. Remember the horns?
Right by the Common.
Yeah, the horns tooting and people cheering and yelling out the window.
You don't think that's happening in parts of the country that voted for Trump? I bet it is.
Oh, it is, but it's not happening across the divide. This is different. This is not whether you want low taxes. This is a different thing. It's the meanness. It's the cruelty. You know, I think that's, at least for me, that's...
I'm with you.
He's a cruel person, and Stephen Miller is a cruel person, and that Honan person seems like a cruel person who shrugs and says, well, you know, let's not worry about separating children from their families. We'll just deport the whole bunch of them. I mean, that's essentially what he said in a cruel way. Did you hear him?
Of course I did.
Yeah,
now,
that's the thing.
Can I get to something else for a second?
No, on the JFK website right there.
No, for whatever it's worth, there are some people who work on the show probably won't be working on it tomorrow. Let me explain what's going on.
I better not wear that dress again tonight.
That's
the one I wore last time.
It's the only dress you've worn the last 400 events you've gone to. If you go to the JFK Library website, like Jamie just did, Jamie, and you do get, if you go to the link on my Twitter account, you get the picture of every single panelist who's participating tonight at Endicott College.
Shouldn't the Endicott College people have you on their website?
If I must say, I specifically asked them for security reasons not to mention that I was coming. I said, if anybody asks, you don't know me, which they've honored. You know what? In all seriousness, this event that I'm doing, I'm not doing it.
With Eileen McNamara,
okay, fine. I'm moderating
Pulitzer Prize
it
winner.
Okay, fine.
Used to be at the Boston Globe. Brilliant reporter. Heather Cox Richardson. I believe she's number one on Substack.
I think she may be.
She is like the big star on Substack. Boston College historian. Brilliant. I read her every day. We're going to be there,
Well, you know
Jim.
what we decided to do with our thing?
Yeah.
We decided the thing tonight at Endicott, we wouldn't have celebrities. We'd rely on experts. People who really knew their stuff, people like me.
That's right.
For example. And again, 6 o'clock tonight. You don't have to do 7 o'clock, which is really late at the JFK Library. And let's take one more call.
And everyone is going to wear a dickie.
Maybe they will, Marjorie. Maybe we will have a Jim and Marjorie dickie. For free, by the way. It's very possible.
I think Jared
up
is
there
here.
in Beverly. We're not ready for Jared. Well, actually, maybe we are. Jared, let me ask you something. I'm guessing that I should know this better. If you were asked to go to a communal dinner, even if it was to address some people's loneliness, but also to address, hopefully allow you to overcome the political divide, I am guessing you would be as reluctant as I've historically been to participate. Is that correct?
No, I do love communal dinners. I do.
That is not true.
No, it's true. The only thing I don't like is when in the middle of the dinner they make you change seats and move to another table so you can speak to someone else, because I like to get situated. Then you have your little community. No, I do like it.
Yeah, you don't like musical chairs at one of those events.
But how do you know what I just realized for the first time? We know, what's the disease you suffer from again?
Misophonia, but I've talked about this.
No, how do you, wait a second. How come you don't suffer from misophonia? That's when someone eats near him. And you could be 100 rows away in the theater and Jared's got to leave. How come you're not troubled by someone chewing who's sitting next to you at a communal dinner table?
I have educated you about this.
Well,
I've told you that when I'm eating, for some reason, it doesn't bother me. So I don't hear it.
Well, that's an interesting
Meanwhile, I have a question for you.
No.
I want to know how many texts you're getting about my event.
You have an event tonight, too?
I have an event, too.
What is your event?
I can't wait to compare numbers.
What is your event?
So mine is next Thursday with John Waters.
Oh, John Waters. Well, he may blow us out of the water. Is that the Coolidge Corner Theater?
Oh, it is, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I saw that the other night when I went to see Conclave. John Waters was advertised. He's a big star. Jared may beat us both.
Yeah, but in all fairness, I'm trying to be nice to Marjorie now for a second. You don't have to compete with me. She has to compete with me tonight, which is obviously quite a hurdle
it's
to get over.
It's called Interpreting the 2024 Elections at the JFK Library.org.
I'm streaming it already. I'm watching the people lined up already, hours before your event.
I just went to the Coolidge Corner website and typed in Jared Bowen. It came up N.A. There's nothing.
Well, it just occurred to me, if Marjorie knew about John Waters there and she didn't know about me, I think I have some conversations have to have with the Coolidge. I don't think my picture was there.
Your picture was not there, because I saw you in the previews to the Catholic Church thing, Conclave, which is going to, needless to say, has a twist. It has a great ending, which is going to upset a lot of the conservative Catholics. That made me love it even more. Anyway,
okay,
Jared,
what are you doing on your show?
We're going to be talking about the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. They just reopened after a major renovation. We'll talk about their story and their place in this country. They do something nobody else does in focusing on the art of women. We'll talk about Just Bookish, the new bookstore opened in partly by the brainchild of Poet Laureate of Boston, Portia Olayiwola. And if you want some holiday decorating tips, where better to go than Newport, Rhode Island for the Newport Mansions, because the glamour guru behind designing all of that, will be on the show talking about holiday decorating tips.
That's fabulous. Can I say one thing, which I probably shouldn't say, but I have to? I really want to thank you on the air for coming to my event tonight in Beverly. I know you didn't want Marjorie to know, but that is really kind.
That's right.
I'll see you tonight about 6 o'clock. At the beginning of the show tomorrow is going to summarize what Heather Cox Richardson had to say tonight at the JFK Library.
Thank you for tuning in. I'm Marjorie Egan in Dorchester. He's Jim Brady wherever.
Goodbye. See you tomorrow. See you tonight. Bye.
Good Tuesday afternoon. It is 48 and windy here in Boston. I'm Greg Farisi. Thanks for having me. Coming up in a bit, a Haydn piano concerto featuring Leif Ove Ansnes, and later, some Gilbert and Sullivan pirate adventure. Here now, the Baltimore Consort.